Knoxville. Okay.
You decide, but decide after 1 o'clock and then make your decision there.
Not forever.
Braden, how are you?
I'm doing well, man. How are you boys?
I'm good.
Can't complain. Friday. It's a beautiful day.
That's a good place to be.
We've got a big topic coming up today about Tennessee football, Tennessee recruiting specifically, and whether or not we can judge Josh Heupel's first recruiting class at Tennessee. That conversation will start in about 15 minutes. Ryan Callahan of GoVols 247 is scheduled to join us, talk about Tennessee's newest commitment yesterday. Look, I think we're doing you all a disservice if we're going like deep into the tape of a 17-year-old in the middle of July.
What? No.
But it raises
This
a larger discussion.
We are going to win national championships.
Raises a larger
because of this one player.
Vols
His
are
name is
back.
Squirrel, for Christ's sake.
Vols are back.
That's a hell of a nickname, by the way.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
You need
I
to
actually
put
don't mind that. I like that.
A drop on the board of Philip Fulmer's. The Vols are back.
Balls are back. I'm surprised that wasn't utilized more by opposing fan bases because I thought the moment he said that, I said, oh, no.
I
Anytime
thought
Tennessee.
it was utilized. I saw it
Did
a
you
lot.
see it a good bit?
Oh, yeah.
I just want to hear the drop of like, well, recruiting's been good from the press conference. What do you mean recruiting's been good, Phil?
That's why
What are
we're
you
here,
talking
Phil.
about?
We're here because
Phil,
recruiting's
I have
been
follow-up
good.
questions.
It's been too good.
There's legal issues because recruiting's been good.
We kid because we care.
Coach Dave McGinn is coming up at 12:20. I have specific process kinds of questions for Coach Mack on what's Caleb Farley been doing the last couple months? What's Bud Dupree been doing the last couple months? Like how
Is Caleb Farley just doing lunges?
well, how practically do you integrate a player into your team for the first time without them being able to take reps? They're taking mental reps.
Oh, the old mental rep.
We're going to talk a little bit of Butch Jones later in the show today, too.
Oh, do we have to?
Yes, we do.
All right.
I've decreed it.
This is the way.
Yeah, you had an interesting point about this because we're going to look at different coaches' recruiting classes at Group of 5 schools before they got Power 5 jobs. And the important aspect of that is their ranking within their Group of 5 conference, which is a discussion I like. Also, We're going to compare Josh Heupel's recruiting classes at UCF to coaches who have not been good at their Power 5 stops, including his predecessor at UCF, Scott Frost.
I think the most important piece, at least for me, when it comes to trying to predict Josh Heupel's ability, there are two things. Number one, he's got experience recruiting in the Southeast. He was an offensive coordinator from Missouri, so he's been in the market, the region, whatever. So he should have some relationships with some coaches in some of these places, right? He recruited in Florida. He recruited in the SEC, in the East in particular. That's number one. That can be overblown at times, but it is worth noting. But to your point, and I believe this, if you are a great football coach and good at recruiting in a G5 level, you're not expected to beat Bama and Ohio State and Clemson for players, but you are expected to dominate your conference. P.J. Fleck dominated the MAC in recruiting at Western Michigan, which is a very tough place to recruit. I think he had the number one rated class in that conference 3 straight years. They went undefeated, got to a Cotton Bowl, and he got the Minnesota job because of it.
The one time they weren't first, they were second as well.
It's obvious, right? Like Luke Fickell, the job he's doing at Cincinnati right now recruiting, he's dominating recruiting in the AAC. Scott Frost dominated in recruiting at UCF. The key is to be if you're at that level, coaching matters a lot more. Players matter more the higher you go up, right? Like you get to the NFL, it's about dudes. The SEC, it's less about dudes, but still about dudes. You get to the AAC, and coaching's a much bigger factor. You get down to the FCS level, coaching's even bigger, right? We saw what Will Healy did at Austin Peay, right? So the higher you go up, the players matter more. When you're at that G5 level, you should be able to recruit at a really high level. And at UCF, when you are in Florida, the most talent-rich state in the country, you should be 1 or 2 in your conference. I'm not. We'll save the rest of the conversation, but
right.
You should be first or second, maybe third at worst in the AAC in recruiting if you are worth a salt on the recruiting trail in that conference. Because UCF has the biggest stadium, they have the most fans, they have the most fan support, they have the most dollars, and they're in the best recruiting base of anybody in that conference.
And they've won a national championship.
And they are a national champion.
We'll get to that coming up in hour number 2. Plus, as we mentioned, Ryan Callahan coming up in about 10 to 15 minutes. Last night, as we hit the headlines from your Thursday night, the Phoenix Suns, man. This team went from irrelevant to possibly sweeping the NBA Finals real quick. Devin Booker's incredible. So is Chris Paul, 36-year-old Chris Paul. I made the joke that Father Time really bounced back well after a bad loss to Tom Brady in the Super Bowl with a nice bounce-back win over LeBron James. Father Time's taking a beating by Chris Paul in this NBA playoffs. Father Time also down 2-0 in this series.
We were just talking about recruiting, and we've already spoken a little bit. I think it was Wednesday after Game 1 where we talked about, these are 2 actual teams that are built sort of like real, normal professional sports teams trying to bring a team together and win a team game, playing a team sport, right? And while that is totally true of Milwaukee and Phoenix, and we just talked about Cruton, I mean, Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, let's be very honest about those 2 players. They were 5-star recruits coming out of high school. I think DeAndre Ayton was the number 1 player in the nation, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
I think you're right.
Devin Booker was not far behind.
Top 5, top 10.
Yeah, and these guys went to Kentucky and Arizona.
And Booker was like a role player at Kentucky.
Well, yes, maybe, but
he was also really young for his grade.
And his skill set.
He was 17 at Kentucky.
And Calipari, with all of his strengths, his strength is not exactly like developing a jump shot. That's not exactly what he does well, and that's what Booker is so brilliant.
Rick Barnes done.
Right. And so, again, you talk about super teams and all that stuff, but it should not be a surprise.
No.
When we talk about Jeff Simmons, right, yesterday on the show, and Julio Jones and Derrick Henry, 3 guys that are probably the most physically gifted Titans on the roster, all 5-star recruits coming out of high school, all have been dominant on every field they've ever stepped on. Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton were, it should not be a surprise that they are very, very good. And then you package them with one of the best point guards in the history of the game. And of course, I'm with you. I'm surprised to see him here, but I'm not surprised based on the pedigree of the roster, if that makes sense.
This was Devin Booker's 8th game with 30-plus points in these playoffs out of the 18 games Phoenix has played to get to the NBA Finals. 490 points, by the way, for him so far this postseason. That is 3rd all-time for a player competing in his first playoffs, according to ESPN Stats and Information, trailing only Rick Barry and Julius Erving. That's even more impressive when you consider they swept the last round.
What was the record Ja Morant had? Didn't Ja Morant have like the most points scored in the first 4 games of a postseason career ever with like Oscar Robertson and
Something like that.
somebody else? Like
Trae Young is in that type of conversation too.
Yeah,
First
he is.
most points in a first ever postseason.
yeah, and it's all like, is it 4 games? Is it 1 series? Is it 2 series? Is it a full postseason? And there's different records for all of those,
Exactly.
obviously. But I want to say Morant was, and you guys can, if sports fans are the greatest fact checkers of all time. So somebody check the facts here. I want to say Ja Morant scored as many, only like 2 other guys have scored more points than Ja Morant did in the first 4 games or something like that. We'll figure it out.
It's incredible to see Kobe Bryant comparisons with Devin Booker as well. NBA media is so reckless with that stuff. So reckless.
I mean, when Devin Booker was at Kentucky, we knew he was talented. He was one of the highest recruited players in the country, but he did average like 10 points per game, right? Like, I don't think any of us
he was good.
saw this
He wasn't-
level of stardom.
He wasn't
coming.
great, but
He was
good.
the number 22 player in the nation.
I think he was the
coming
6th
out
man
high
of the
school.
year that year in the SEC.
Yeah, 5-star kid. I'd like to know who else was on that recruiting class. I
We
get
will
all
fact check
I
that
get
as
all
well.
the I get all the different Kentucky three-person stud freshman classes confused. It's like DeMarcus Cousins was with John Wall. Okay,
Uh-huh.
they choked in the postseason. Okay, Julius Randle was with who? I don't remember, but they weren't good in the regular season. Then they were an 8 seed, and then they went on a run to the championship game. The best one was Anthony Davis and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, and they got to the. You have to like try to keep them all straight. I think they lost to Vandy, right? Didn't that Anthony Davis team lose to Vandy in the SEC championship game in the tournament? I believe, and then they went on to win the national title.
Yes. Yeah, because it was the DeMarcus Cousins, John Wall team that beat Tennessee by 30 in the semifinals of the SEC tournament.
I was
I was seated
I was
in
there
the,
for that,
I
yeah.
was seated in the top row of Bridgestone Arena for that game. The top row.
That's up there.
It was fun. Coming up, we're going to talk with Ryan Callahan, GoVols247. Buck Rising, though, is in our Twitter mentions.
Oh, you want to know why? Karl Anthony Towns was the starter on that team. Who
As
a
was
freshman in
Willie
the class with
Cauley-Stein
Devin
in
That
there
checks
as well.
Booker.
Really, Cauley
So there's why
Stein.
Devin Booker wasn't
Yes.
averaging more than 12 points a game.
Lucas sends out a tweet pubbing the show on Zone TV, where you can join us, by the way, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitter, at 1045 The Zone. And Buck says, stop tagging me in Shiano while I'm on vacation. That's tough.
So, all right, here's then the request I have for everyone listening. Go tag Buck in a question about something.
I'm checking your Twitter while you're on
Just
vacation.
ask him something like,
Well,
how's the soup today?
Lucas
Just-
can tweet
just-
from Buck's account, so we might as well just pub the show
True.
while he's on vacation from his
Just
account.
flood the mentions. Get his mentions all filled up with like really random questions about old things.
For the record, I prefer to spend as little time on his account as possible.
It's where hopes and dreams go to die.
It's
Do you prefer a
It's a dark
robe
place.
poisonous
or
place.
boxers? How's the soup?
Let's ask Ryan Callahan that.
Let's ask all these questions of Buck.
Coming up next, Tennessee has a new commitment. We'll spend a little bit of time on that, but a lot more time on how Josh Heupel is building his first recruiting class and if Tennessee fans should be worried or not that an elite class in the state of Tennessee so far is not committing to Josh Heupel's Vols. Off and running on the Friday edition of the Buck Rising Show. We'll keep it rolling with Ryan Callahan. We come back on 104.5 The Zone.
The best Titans coverage can be found on your smartphone.
Comeback foiled. Titans 4-2.
Download the 104.5 The Zone app. Your home for Titans football and the flagship of Titans radio. 104.5 The Zone.
guy is not how you win a championship. You have to recruit 25 guys over 4 years. And that's where we have to find out what Josh Heupel can do.
Ryan Callahan of GoVols 247 joins us now. Ryan, a commitment for Tennessee yesterday. Lots to talk about with this class. We appreciate the time. How you doing today, man?
Hey, doing well. How are you guys?
We are good. Tennessee, of course, Marquarius White yesterday, 4.37 in the 40-yard dash, 10.68, second place in 6A in the state of Alabama in the 100 last year. Ryan, you know, anytime I can put a track number next to a guy, I'm happy as the track nerd that I am. But we know about the speed. What exactly does White bring to this Tennessee recruiting class? How big of a get is this specifically for Tennessee and Josh Heupel?
Yeah, I think this is a really nice pickup. This is what I'm sure we'll talk about this in a minute. There are some built-in challenges for Tennessee this year. There just are. There's some things that have nothing to do with anything Josh Heupel's staff has done wrong or anything like that, and it's just going to be tough for Tennessee this year because of the situation they inherited, because of the NCAA cloud sort of hovering over the program. So to me, these are the exact types of players Tennessee needs to be battling for and trying to get in this class. Guys who are quality players, who are maybe – and you can get some higher-ranked players too. And I think Tennessee's going to get its fair share of those guys, but I just don't think this is going to be very likely to be a top 10 class or something like that. So you're going to have to find some quality guys who are maybe not as highly ranked, not necessarily coveted by top programs, but who at least have offers from good programs. And that's the case here where Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Florida State, Michigan, Ole Miss have all offered Marquarius White. And by the way, the fun part that everyone sure enjoys about this is that he goes by the nickname of Squirrel. Squirrel White. And you get a guy like that who's got more than 25 offers, who, as you said, has great speed and is a good fit, I think, for Tennessee's offense. And I think you plug him in as a slot guy in this offense that wants to spread the field and wants to throw down the field. And he could be a great fit for what Tennessee's doing there. And kind of a skinny guy, but has the speed to be a difference maker. So I think it's a nice pickup for Tennessee, and certainly the type of guy that Tennessee's happy to be getting when you can consider who all he at least had offers from and was recruited by this spring.
So, Ryan, when you talk about Tennessee maybe not having a chance at a top 10, top 20 recruiting class, given everything that's gone on with the NCAA and with the previous staff and everything Josh Heupel's got to inherit, what traits is this staff specifically looking for? Because if I know, hey, I'm not going to be able to get a top 10, top 15 class, but I can recruit to elite speed, a guy that can run a 4.37 in the 40. Is speed and quickness the biggest thing this staff is going to recruit to? How does this staff try to put together a class that they can build on moving forward when they know that being in the top 10 just isn't realistic this season?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any one trait necessarily. It's the main thing I think is just getting quality football players that maybe aren't as highly ranked or highly coveted for one reason or another. And that doesn't mean you're necessarily looking for those, but that's often what you're going to end up getting. I think we've seen Tennessee go after a number of highly ranked guys, but it's just been tough for them to win some of those battles so far for obvious reasons. And the dead period, let's be honest, really hurt Tennessee, I think, not being able to host visitors until June 1st. We've seen first-year staffs at Tennessee have some success selling a fresh start, selling a chance to be a part of something new. And this staff just didn't get much of a chance to do that because they couldn't even make a face-to-face connection with these players in some cases before they made a decision. So that put Tennessee back. So I think when you consider all that, you're just looking for quality players, and Tennessee's got a lot of needs to address, especially after everything they lost in the transfer portal this offseason. A lot to replace on defense going into 2022 as you look at who they're preparing to lose on that side of the ball. You got Alontae Taylor you expect to be gone. A handful of defensive linemen. You've already lost some players at that position. So lots of needs on defense. But to me, it's just about filling needs and finding fits for their system. And in this case, there's some different characteristics they're looking for. Obviously, speed at receiver is one thing. And I think on defense, you need some pass rushers. You need some long, fast corners. You need a lot on this team to kind of patch up the roster. But just kind of trying to get good quality players across the board and fill as many needs as you can. And if you can't fill everything, the transfer portal, as we saw this year, could help them next year.
Obviously, playing time is what he's selling to people on the recruiting trail right now, Ryan. But I guess my question is, he's got experience in the SEC footprint as an OC at Missouri and the head coach at UCF. But to be, we saw this with Derek Dooley, completely whiffed on like ignoring the state of Tennessee. Butch Jones, for all of his flaws, actually did a pretty good job in the state of Tennessee. But you also have to be really good in Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia to some degree as well. The footprint for Tennessee is much better than people realize. How much work does Josh Heupel and his staff have to do to sort of build the relationships inside of the core Tennessee footprint? Does he have those relationships, or is he having to start all of that from scratch?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. They do have some of that in place when you look at guys like Rodney Garner, who's obviously been in the SEC for a long time. He's got plenty of experience recruiting the state of Georgia in particular, where he's done some of his best work over the years. Willie Martinez has obviously been at Tennessee before, has recruited parts of Tennessee. He's actually kind of slid right back into recruiting part of the area he had during his previous Tennessee tenure with parts of Middle Tennessee, including Murfreesboro. And then you've got guys who've recruited the state at times in the past. Cody Burns at Auburn had been in Tennessee at times. So you've got guys that have some experience, but not as many deeply rooted connections. And that's why I think it was so important. For this staff felt it was so important to hire a guy like Jerry Mack, the running backs coach, who is from Memphis and has some ties in the state. And obviously Memphis, one of the biggest cities in the state. You got to find some players there. Even though you're never going to get everybody in Memphis, you want to get your share of those players over there that are worth pursuing in the SEC. So I think they've had some work to do there. They're not as deeply rooted in the state as some previous staffs have been, but I think that's okay. And Josh Heupel's staff has done a lot of work so far to build some relationships. They reached out to every high school across the state right after spring practice and made contact with someone on every staff. Stuff like that goes a long way to building those relationships you're talking about. So I think they're making up ground there, but I think they've done a pretty good job of catching up quickly and at least putting themselves in a better position for at least where the 2023 class. I don't think they'll be quite as far behind in state.
Ryan Callahan with us, 24/7 Sports. But for any deficiencies they might have in state and for how behind they might be this year, how much of that might you attribute just to bad timing? I don't want to call it bad luck because as far as pending NCAA sanctions, Tennessee has brought that on itself with previous staffs. But bad timing in that this is probably the best period we've ever seen as far as high school football talent in the state of Tennessee, and it feels harder to recruit to Tennessee football than it has been in recent years, and that's really saying something.
No question. This has been bad timing. That's a good way to put it. Where again, not necessarily just bad luck, just everything happening at the wrong time in a way. A coaching change could have worked out in a way this year because a fresh start, might have done Tennessee some good coming off a 3-7 season. But at the same time, the former staff had more long-standing relationships with some of these guys and had been pursuing Ty Simpson, the quarterback from Martin, who's committed to Alabama, and Walter Nolan, the defensive lineman that Tennessee's still battling from the Memphis area. So that a lot of guys like that the former staff had more of a connection to, and that transition made it tough. And again, not being able to meet those guys earlier this year made it tough. And then just not having a lot of buzz around Tennessee's program too. You just it's been too easy for other schools to come into this state in recent years and take some good players. T. Higgins going to Clemson and Cade Mays originally going to Georgia and stuff like that. It's happened on a pretty regular basis lately, and that makes it a lot easier for in-state players to kind of just shrug off Tennessee a little bit in the recruiting process sometimes, unless they're just one of the teams recruiting them hardest. You just got to outwork everybody and sell them on the benefits of staying in state. And the staff's had some work to do and obviously faced some challenges with that this year. But I think it's just bad timing. They're not going to get everybody they want in state this year. They've already missed out on some, trying to land some others that they still have a shot at. So they'll get a handful of guys, I think, in state, but it's going to be a challenging year where, it's such a good class in state. You're just not going to get all of them because of the timing and how this has all worked out.
Yeah, between Jordan James as well, another guy, running back committed to Georgia, who spent time at Brentwood Academy, now at the powerhouse that is Oakland High School. You mentioned Ty Simpson and Walter Nolan as well. Where does Tennessee, Ryan, stand with Walter Nolan, a guy who's going to be able to pick his spot in the SEC and beyond? How hard, I know Tennessee's obviously pushing hard when they've got a 5-star right in their backyard, but how much of a shot does Tennessee have to at least stay in the mix with Walter Nolan as we get closer to the season and closer to that early signing period?
Yeah, I think Tennessee's done a good job to get back in it because if you remember and you followed his recruitment, he put out a top 8 back in early April, I believe it was, that didn't include Tennessee. So was pretty apparent early on where Tennessee looked like a strong contender under Jeremy Pruitt for Walter Nolan. It looked pretty apparent that coaching change and everything that happened with the program had pretty quickly shuffled them out of the mix. But they've gotten back in it, got him on campus twice last month. There's been a lot of speculation about at least the possibility of him transferring to a school in the Knoxville area going into this year. There have been reasons to think Tennessee could get back in that one and really have a shot. But at the same time, I think they still got a long ways to go. I think they're still chasing at least a few other teams. Florida, Michigan, and Georgia have all had reason to feel good about where they stand in just the past month. They've all gotten him on campus in the past month, and Alabama also in the mix. So those are kind of the main 5 contenders right now, I think. So it's one of those situations where if he announces a decision before the season, he might end up going elsewhere, or that's probably the likely outcome right now. But there's still a chance where Tennessee maybe could flip him later in the process. So you keep recruiting him, see how it goes. It's probably a long shot, but Tennessee's not out of it just yet.
Is Ryan Callahan doing power cleans during the interview?
That's what it sounds like.
No. Just got some background noise here on the street where I am.
You're all good. All good. Ryan Callahan, GoVols 247 with us. Ryan, look, I mean, I know Tennessee fans are disappointed about missing out on Ty Simpson, but from all reports, Taven Jackson appears to be a pretty good second option for Tennessee. He's impressed at some Elite 11 camps recently. How much has his stock risen in the past couple of months, and how much is this maybe kind of the cornerstone of Tennessee's class of 2022?
Yeah, no, I think this is his stock has improved a bit. At the same time, he had more than 30 offers before he committed to Tennessee, so I think he was a pretty well-regarded guy in the first place. But yeah, people saw his performance at the Elite 11 finals last week out in California, noticed that he wasn't named to the Elite 11, wasn't among 24/7 Sports top 11 performers out there at that event. And there are 20 quarterbacks out there, so not making the top 11. People say, oh, did he have a bad week? I think a lot of people that saw him for the first time came away pretty impressed by him, frankly, and just saw that it's a little bit raw, his skill set. He's not a finely tuned, finished product yet, but I think you see a lot of potential there because he's a big frame guy, good arm, makes some really nice throws at times. He's just not a guy who, has focused on football year-round because he is a multi-sport athlete. He spends time with other sports, and that takes away a little bit from that. And you don't mind seeing that as a college coach usually because you like guys that are competitive and just good all-around athletes like that. And then also he's in an offense that doesn't ask him to throw the ball a ton. He's been in a run-heavy offense for the most part that he's only thrown the ball 20 times a game a lot of times, and sometimes not even that. So that takes away from his development a little bit too, I think. So when you consider where he is now and where he could be in the future, just given all of his natural skills and physical attributes, I think there's a lot to like about him, and still going to be a guy that needs some time to develop once he gets on campus. But that's a nice centerpiece of Tennessee's class right now, and a guy that I think they're able to sell a little bit in recruiting as, hey, this might be our quarterback of the future. Come play with him.
Ryan Callahan, GoVols 247 with us. Last thing from me, Ryan. Brandon Turnage, Juwan Mitchell, 2 guys that are very important to this Tennessee team. I know Juwan Mitchell, just based off of need alone, probably the most important transfer that Tennessee has added. Would you say Brandon Turnage at this point is probably that second most important guy that Tennessee has added through the transfer portal this offseason?
Yeah, I think you can definitely make the case for that. It's going to be fascinating to see just how many of these guys end up being as important as they appear to be on paper and how well they played this year. Because the transfer portal can be a very mixed bag sometimes, and we'll find that out more in the future, I think, too. But, even Dejon Terry, the Kansas defensive line transfer, Caleb Tremblay, the USC defensive line transfer, I think considering what Tennessee's lost there recently, there's a real opportunity for both of those guys to make an immediate impact, and I think Tennessee needed those extra bodies this year. So you can make a case for several of them. Javonte Payton filled a major need because I think this staff feels it has a good number of slot receivers, but not a whole lot of perimeter receivers that can play on the outside. So that they had needs, and there's a reason they went to the transfer portal to fill them. But Brandon Turnage was a huge pickup, and there's no doubt with Tennessee's just the struggles they've had finding good players in the secondary. Getting a guy like that's got 2 years of experience under his belt at Alabama and still has 4 years of eligibility left thanks to the COVID year. That's a big deal, and not just for this year, but for maybe the next 2 or 3 years. So it's a huge addition for Tennessee and gives them potentially a plug-and-play guy if he's as good as advertised. So I think we might end up looking back on that as the best addition, and we'll see if Joe Milton ends up being as big as he could be too. I think a lot of people see him as maybe the the leader in the clubhouse, or at least right up there with Harrison Bailey in that quarterback race. If he ends up being the answer at quarterback, we'll probably end up looking back at that as the biggest addition.
Ryan, part of the larger discussion we're having today is what context Tennessee fans should view Josh Heupel's first recruiting class in. Do you consider it a bit of a fool's errand to really dive deep into his classes at UCF and what he accomplished there? Like, how much do you do that as a recruiting editor at GoVols 247? And how much should we be looking at that when identifying maybe his strengths and weaknesses within the SEC?
Frankly, I think not really at all. The only thing I really looked at from his UCF background and thought was worth studying was maybe the general build and skill sets of those players and what he would be looking for at Tennessee. I think that sort of showed you what they were looking for on the offensive line, what they wanted at quarterback. And I do think you can look at their track record at quarterback and at least take some comfort in knowing they've found quarterbacks without being able to go out and get 5 stars at that position. So that's maybe one of the things you take from that. But otherwise, it's just so different recruiting in a place like UCF where you don't have tradition, you don't have the SEC to sell. Tennessee just is able to attract a totally different type of player from UCF in most cases, and I don't take a whole lot from that. And Josh Heupel too. People I think sort of forget this. I know he didn't have the people look back at the rankings when he was at UCF and think maybe he's not a great recruiter. He knows what big time recruiting is like. He's been at Oklahoma before, obviously on staff there. He knows that you have to recruit at a pretty high level to run a program like Tennessee and be successful, especially in the SEC. So I think people looking back at those results and thinking, Josh Heupel not a very good recruiter. I don't think you can take a whole lot from that. He's been in the SEC multiple times or been in the past for multiple years at Missouri and obviously been at Oklahoma. So he knows what it takes to recruit at this level. He's just it's just a matter of getting it done. And he's got enough guys on his staff that I think he thinks he can get it done. But we'll find out. And it's tough to gauge much based on this first class, I think, because of the challenges we talked about. It's just a class that's probably going to have a hard time cracking the top 15, maybe top 20 if things go really well. And that's probably even asking a little bit much. So I think a top 25 class is a realistic goal for this class, and we'll see where they go in the future. But for this year, at least, it's going to be tough, and it's just a matter of getting some quality players that can make up sort of the foundation of this rebuilding effort for Josh Heupel's staff.
Ryan Callahan has been our guest here on 104.5 The Zone. You can find him on Twitter at Ryan Callahan 247. Ryan, great stuff as always, man. We appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right, good stuff there. When we come back, let's react to really that last comment from Ryan more than anything else.
It's one thing to know that you need to recruit at a high level to win at Tennessee. It's another thing to be able to do it.
Yes.
Those are two very different things.
Ryan has given us a seamless transition into how we were planning on spending the second hour of today's show. He didn't even know it either.
Would you look at that?
It's perfect.
And Lucas is resetting during the interview?
Gosh.
Tremendous.
It's like we know how to do this.
Tremendous.
All right, tweet at Buck Rising your thoughts from the conversation with Ryan Callahan today. We'll continue with our thoughts next on 104.5 The Zone.
Ramon Foster, 11 years of real NFL experience delivered to your ears every weekday morning. J. Mart and Ramon, Monday mornings starting at 6 on 104.5 The Zone.
that Butch Jones inflated his ability as a recruiter
Got the Dobbs Barnett.
with a bunch of guys who were sons of Tennessee players.
McKenzie, Vic Wharton.
Dylan Bates.
So all of the guys who grew up Tennessee fans, like Trevor Lawrence, T. Higgins, and Travis Etienne. Is that what we're talking about? Oh, no, we're not talking about those guys anymore?
Twisting the knife, Braden.
Well, I thought the NFL draft was going to be the last time we ever had to watch and have that conversation about Etienne and Lawrence, and then they got drafted by the same team.
I know.
Oh, man.
That picture of Trevor Lawrence wearing the Eric Ainge jersey with like the same bangs like he has now just pushed to the side. I have that Eric Ainge jersey somewhere in my parents'
He went
home.
to a nice salon.
Exact
since
same. Like
then.
I actually kind of double taked when ESPN showed that picture for the first time. I was like, wait, where did ESPN get this picture of me? Because I looked the exact same as a kid, wearing the same exact jersey in some of my earlier trips to Neyland Stadium.
That turned out differently.
So I've been.
I am not a 5-star quarterback. I was like a 2-star runner.
You weren't the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. I do think that while I am totally tongue in cheek, poo-pooing all of this Cruton talk about the individual players, I don't think individual players matter nearly as much as message boards will make you believe. What matters is your team rankings over the course of 3 or 4 classes. That's how every single team that has won the national championship during the playoff era has averaged a top 10 class over the previous 5 seasons. Only 2 teams have made the playoffs without having an average top 15 class. That was Washington and
Washington, Michigan State.
Michigan State. And and the combined scores of those 2 games were 63-7 in the playoffs. So the point is you have to average a top 15 class over the previous 5 seasons to have any prayer of getting into a top 4 playoff. The expansion will help that. I actually, to Lucas's question to Ryan about the in-state class and it just being unlucky and unfortunate that it timed up this way with a coaching change, NCAA investigation. It just is what it is. It just sucks. It's just unfortunate. But it's not going to define Josh Heupel's career at Tennessee. Like, you can overcome. I want to like put Tennessee fans at ease here. Like, we can joke about this stuff, missing out on all these players, but it's not going to be the reason Josh Heupel is successful or fails. This one class is not going to be the reason Josh Heupel's not the coach at Tennessee or is the coach at Tennessee in 5 years. It's going to be what he does for the next 36 months, 48 months. Can you out-coach people? Can you develop talent? Like, there's so many other aspects to this. And so I just don't get too sad if they miss on a bunch of in-state guys this year, which they sounds like they're probably going to do.
But the question is, how much should we look at this class as an indication of what recruiting is going to be like under Josh Heupel? That's the overall question. And how much, you talk about team rankings, and you're right, how much do we look at that in the AAC where there was that regression?
Yeah.
It's not as important in the AAC, but just how much do we look at it? I thought it was interesting what Callahan said, that I really don't look at it. I just look at the type of player he looked for.
I totally disagree with him on the rankings in your conference. I think you have to be at that level to compete in the SEC, like where it is the most cutthroat job in all of college athletics is to recruit football players in the SEC. You have to have some edge to you, some bite to you, and you have to be able to do some, I don't want to say like the dirty work, but like that's how this business works.
Where currently Tennessee is 12th on the 247 team rankings in the SEC.
Like, again, he said top 25 class, right? So if they finish 24th, that's probably going to put them behind South Carolina and Arkansas just normally.
Bottom half, right?
Recruiting well so far in South Carolina.
It would make you 10th probably in the conference, at the 9th or 10th or 11th in the conference. And while this year, it's hard to take it and extrapolate it out and predict the future because of all the extenuating circumstances, right? Like, because of the NCAA, because of all this stuff, first year on the trail, how much are they going to win? All these questions. We're not going to know the answer, guys. We're just not going to know the answer. He needs probably 2 full classes, if not a third one, before we can say definitively, dude just can't do it, or he's doing exactly what he wants to do. Clemson, for example, is incredibly particular about who they recruit. Yeah, they recruited a higher level top 10 classes. But if you look at some of those teams that won national titles, they weren't up there with Bama 1, 2, and 3. They were 9, 10, 11. Because they're very particular about who they pick. And so if Josh Heupel's great at that, and they sign the 6th best class in the SEC and they're number 11, well, Clemson's shown us that you can win really big with that. You can't be 25th and be 12th in the SEC, but you can be 5th or 6th in the SEC and still win big. So we're not going to know the answer in 1 year, and we're not going to know the answer probably in 2 years. And that's a bad radio topic, but like, you're just not going to know for probably 3 years before we can say definitively one way or the other on whether or not he can do it or not.
Joseph Green says, on that question on how much stock we should put into this class, not a ton. Pretty hard to get a true judge of recruiting ability until we're going to get past the sanctions we're going to get. Got to let them recruit on more even footing before we start to freak out, as UT fans are prone to do. I wonder how many.
Right. UT fans, what?
I feel like Joseph Green is in the minority.
Well,
the smart minority, maybe.
Again, like the way I look at recruit, it's always good. It's always better to get the player than not to get the player, right? So, like,
sure.
if there's a good player and we think he's good, and most experts think he's good, it's probably good. It's better to get him than not to get him. But at the end of the day, it's not what the success or failure of Josh Heupel as the head coach at Tennessee will not be predicated on this one collection of 20 guys that comes in. It's just, that's not how college football works.
615-737-1045, the number if you want to jump in. We'll spend a lot of time on this coming up in hour number 2 and looking specifically at group of 5 coaches who have been successful and really just equivalents to Josh Heupel and how they've ranked in their individual conferences when they were in group of 5 conferences. Plus, we'll reset the headlines when we come back. Tokyo is going to be interesting, guys. It's going to be very interesting. No fans.
Yikes.
In a state of emergency. We'll hit that headline, get you an update on the NBA Finals yesterday as well. Lucas Panzica has your headlines next as the Buck Rising Show continues on 104.5 The Zone.
Want exclusive Titans coverage? Just say, hey, Alexa, play 104.5 The Zone.
hanging out with you until 1 o'clock. Talking about Tennessee recruiting, talking to Ryan Callahan in our last hour. He says, Tennessee, don't worry about Josh Heupel's recruiting rankings at UCF. I think all three of us would disagree with that.
I would disagree with that, yeah.
We're going to get into that coming up, a big discussion on that coming up in the next segment. How important is it for you to dominate your conference? Forget about the national rankings. It doesn't really matter that Josh Heupel's class was number 62 in the country in 2018. Where did it rank in the American? Yep. Lane Kiffin's class in 2018 was number 75 in college football. But where was that in Conference USA? And we're also going to compare, because fair or unfair to Josh Heupel and Lane Kiffin, those two guys are always going to be compared. A, because Tennessee fans stupidly wanted him back in Knoxville. Yes, that was stupid, Tennessee fan.
Really?
Not going, yes.
I would hire Lane Kiffin over Josh Heupel 1,000 times out of 1,000.
12 times out of 10.
What he said. It's not even close.
Yep.
It's not even close. Here's the thing. If that USC job doesn't come open, I think I could argue Lane Kiffin is still the head coach at Tennessee right now.
Oh, I think he was not mature enough to stay out of legitimate NCAA trouble.
He's like the guy.
I would agree with Will on that.
I totally agree as well. He was like the thing on the Cheez-It commercial. Like, he's the immature wheel of cheese. Like, that's what he was in Knoxville. But, and how he handled USC, like, again, some of that wasn't, I mean, there's some problems there. You know, he had some interesting life changes at Alabama, you know.
But who doesn't?
You work for Nick Saban.
I'm done with the Saban assistants.
Well, but I mean,
don't care if he was who he was before he was a Saban assistant. Like, he's not the best example of the quote-unquote Saban assistant. Billy Napier, I think, as well, not the best example there either.
What do you mean?
Billy Napier's done it at a group of 5 level and built something from the ground up. Unlike a lot of...
I would disagree. I mean, Louisiana
Jeremy Pruitt came straight from Saban assistant to Tennessee.
I mean, Kirby Smart went directly to Georgia. Jimbo Fisher's technically a Saban assistant. He went, I believe, directly to Florida State.
Yeah,
Will Muschamp.
These are the only good. Like, there's a longer list of the bad ones.
No, there is. Derek Dooley is. I mean,
yeah, there's almost all bad ones. But I think Napier is interesting because Louisiana was a pretty good program under Mark Hudspeth. Actually, he was up here at Austin Peay.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty good program. It sort of dipped, and then he brought him back. But again, this is exactly the same conversation we're having with Josh Heupel at UCF. Louisiana should recruit at the top of their conference. Like, they are one of the better programs in that conference, and they should recruit at a higher level in that conference because of their recruiting base, because of their past history. So, again, it's all relative to what your school's success sort of. That's what makes, again, P.J. Fleck at Western Michigan such an outlier, because Western Michigan is an impossible place to recruit. And the fact that they were recruiting at such a high level at an extremely difficult place to recruit is why he got the Minnesota job and why they were good. Yeah, Kalamazoo. It's a great place to party. But UCF
probably is, actually.
Again, UCF, and this is the one thing I don't necessarily disagree with Ryan, because what happened at UCF is going to actually predict what happens in the future. I'm not saying that Josh Heupel isn't going to, like, Josh Heupel could end up with top 5 classes every year, because we're just all like totally underselling the guy, and the guy's going to end up being great. But don't tell me it doesn't matter that his recruiting classes went from 1st to 2nd to 4th to 7th in the AAC. That absolutely matters. When you are being out recruited by Tulane and Tulsa and, like, again, like, UCF should be at the top of those recruiting rankings where Scott Frost put them. Scott Frost put them at the top of the AAC recruiting, just like Luke Fickell is doing right now with Cincinnati. When you are at that level, you should be if you are great at recruiting, you should be at the top of the conference. Does Josh Heupel's system maybe not? Because this is the complicated thing, and I don't think Tennessee fans want to hear this. The really good coaches who don't recruit at the highest level, Gary Patterson at TCU, Matt Campbell at Iowa State, Bill Snyder at Kansas State, Chris Peterson at Washington, these guys that are viewed as very good football coaches, but sort of like to be more picky and choosy on the recruiting trail, and they're sort of in the 20s and 30s in the rankings.
Sure.
Great football coaches. How many of those programs have competed for national titles?
Well,
none of them.
How many of those programs have a bigger chance to compete for national titles now in an expanded college football playoff?
Now, that is the idea of the expansion.
Which is also going to help you get from 20 to 30 to 10 to 20 in recruiting rankings.
Iowa State peels a guy off of the Oklahoma class because they made the playoff.
I love this piece in The Athletic talking about this a couple weeks ago, using Boston College as the example. In Boston College, I think it was their AD, was quoted as saying, look, if we can hang another banner, shout out Nashville Predators, if we can hang another banner, no matter what it is, whether it's a national title or if we can hang a banner that says college football playoff appearance 2024.
It's like going to Omaha.
Then that's easier to recruit to.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the banner is.
Yep.
At Nashville Predators.
Like if you are Boston, even let's stay in the SEC. Let's go with Kentucky, Missouri, South Carolina, Arkansas.
Sure.
Teams that haven't won national titles.
Mike Leach.
In the modern era. If Kentucky were to make it to a college football playoff, sneak in 10-2,
Which I don't think is out of the question.
They almost did it. If there was a 12-team playoff a couple years ago,
Yeah.
they were on their way to a
2018.
10-2 season if Jeremy Pruitt hadn't beaten them, ironically. If that or Missouri's had a couple, they were in the SEC championship game, one win away from the 4-team playoff,
right?
With head coach James Franklin as quarterback, and,
I was about to say, I was like, that was the James Franklin year, wasn't it?
And but they were 11-2 after losing to Auburn and Trey Mason. They were 11-2, I believe. Yeah. That would have absolutely got them into the playoff. You don't think that team is brought back to campus every single year and celebrated like as the thing that happened?
Playoff team.
Y'all remember that one playoff team from 2027? Like if Kentucky does that, or South Carolina.
It's like the Titans team that went to Kansas City and Marcus Mariota caught his own touchdown pass. Like we talk about that. That Titans playoff team that won a game on the road in Arrowhead Stadium is kind of what got the ball rolling a little bit.
This shouldn't
be
the
college version.
This shouldn't be hard for Tennessee fans. Are you going to celebrate the 2021 college baseball team?
Absolutely.
For getting to Omaha for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
You're damn right you are.
Despite the lack of titles outside of a division.
Of course you are.
Vandy fans are shaking.
The fans will that's not true. Vandy fans. What are the teams that you celebrate?
No, I know.
2011, 14, 19, and 20. Like
the ones that got the ball rolling.
The ones that got to Omaha. Those are the ones you celebrate. And so if Iowa State and North Carolina and Cincinnati are all of a sudden making the playoff, hopefully what that does is it peels off a recruit or two from Oklahoma, Ohio State, Alabama. And in the SEC, what you want, if you're Josh Heupel in Tennessee, is you're hoping that LSU, Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, all these other programs, if they all take one from Bama, now we're talking.
Well, let me
all you got to do is take one. But if you take 5 away from Bama, maybe they're not going to win 6 titles.
Let me pose this as we track it back to the concern regarding Heupel recruiting. What's more concerning to you, the regression in recruiting rankings at UCF or the regression in record at UCF, going 12-1, 10-3?
The answer is yes.
6-4.
It's all together.
Yeah, the two are tied together because you look at the injuries UCF had in 2020.
Yeah, the special circumstances.
That was the big discussion. No, but I'm saying if you recruit better, you can absorb the blow of injuries to key players more effectively.
I will say,
if you have better depth on your team.
And I've got to go back and check because I think Scott Frost might have recruited both of these guys. So I got to make sure. But they did lose Mackenzie Milton and went right to Dylan Gabriel.
No, that's a Heupel guy.
Which is a pretty big.
Yeah, Gabriel was a Heupel guy.
I think Gabriel was a Heupel guy, and I think
which is why
Milton was a Frost guy.
Which is why I said,
yeah, certainly.
While Caden Salter was a Tennessee Volunteer in his short stint in Knoxville, I was still a believer that Caden Salter was going to start at least a couple of football games for Tennessee this past year. Because this offense, while it is high octane, while it's exciting, pretty straightforward as far as from the quarterback position. It's why guys in this offense don't succeed in the NFL because it's one read.
It's very,
and then you're either running or you're throwing a bubble screen or you're going deep.
That was the entire,
it is simple.
That was the entire scouting report on Drew Lock is that it's one and go, one and throw. And that was that's why it took him longer to get going. And
I still think Caden Salter was going to be a starting quarterback for Tennessee last year because of the proof of concept of what Dylan Gabriel did after the season had already started as a true freshman.
Let's play the game of what ifs then, because I actually don't necessarily agree with him getting dismissed from the team.
Interesting. Lucas and I have had this discussion at length as well.
I think as a 17-year-old, he's not doing a ton of things that like almost all other 17-year-olds around the country.
Well, it's going back to the Nick Saban discussion, right? Of why is the solution getting rid of a guy when if you actually want to help a kid,
well, let's be honest.
You work with him.
Did Jeffrey Simmons do something worse? Yeah, he did. He did something a lot worse, and Dan Mullen took a lot of heat at SEC Media Days when he suspended him one game of his true freshman season. So he took a lot of heat for that. Again, that's another debate for another time.
Sure.
The point is the what-if game here for me with Josh Heupel is, what does it tell us about how Josh Heupel is going to run a program?
Exactly.
And it's one of two things. And we just don't know, because we don't know what if Caden Salter goes on to be an all-conference quarterback at
I fully expect that.
wherever he goes, wherever he lands, or wherever he finishes his career. The question for me will be, like, I respect that you have standards, and I respect that you have a certain level of expectation for behavior. I think that's great. I think that's wonderful to have. You think Urban Meyer did that in the SEC?
Huh.
I mean, like,
We know that
Nick
Urban Meyer
Saban,
did.
Jimbo Fisher, Kirby Smart. Again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
Cam Newton.
We can all debate. I guess, Cam Newton stole some laptops and got kicked off the team, I guess.
So, yeah, I guess he did.
Sure, there was one time Urban Meyer did something right. The point is if you are good enough in college football, you will get pro football, NBA, politics, music, you name it. If you are good enough, you will keep getting chances. And so I'm curious if Josh Heupel kicked off a player that was, to what you believe, right, is a guy who could have played for this team. He was good enough to start a game or two or be in the roster or be a factor, right, early in his career. If he's that good, and I'm not arguing that he isn't, he could be. If he's that good, how are you going to run a program? Like, are you going to keep guys that are going to make you better and maybe help them through a tough time that they're going through and making poor decisions, try to make them more mature individual because you're good enough? Like, we have to debate these things all the time in our lives.
Yeah,
Talent versus
Right.
opportunity and maturity and all this stuff. Like, it's I don't think, again, I have to read more details, I guess, but I don't, if he's that good, I would have kept him on the team. I know that sounds terrible, but like,
Right.
That's the reality of this.
615-737-1045, the number if you want to jump in. We'll open the phone lines when we come back, and we're going to get into this discussion on group of 5 coaches, where they finished within their individual conferences. These are the guys we're going to give you comparisons on to Josh Heupel. Scott Frost, it's the easiest one. Lane Kiffin at Florida Atlantic. PJ Fleck at Western Michigan. Where did they finish in their individual conferences, and should Tennessee fans care? That's a question we're going to pose to you, the listener, as well. 615-737-1045. Are you worried about Josh Heupel's recruiting at UCF? Plus, we've got your chance to win Music City Grand Prix tickets. Lucas Panzica's got some tickets for you for one of the coolest events that's come to Nashville in quite a long time. That's coming up in 15 minutes as well. We'll do all that and more when we come back. It's the Buck Rising Show, and it's 104.5 The Zone.
Every great Titans moment happens here. Your home for Titans football and the flagship for Titans radio. 104.5 The Zone.
Got your chance coming up in 10 minutes to head to the Music City Grand Prix. So stand by for the number 2 call to talk to Lucas Panzica, who's got tickets to give you.
I suggested that we all tweet Buck Rising about Malcolm Butler at the same time.
It wouldn't hurt your chances.
And tweeter number 10.
It also won't
gets
help
tickets.
your chances, but it wouldn't hurt them. Yeah.
Maybe you guys just do that for me, and I'll give you guys like an Athlon Sports Magazine or something.
Can we pick like a word or like an odd like
Malcolm Butler. Those are the 2 words.
Can we all tweet Malcolm Butler at
11:41.
11:41 a.m. Let's do it.
Everyone just tweet Malcolm
We're going to
Butler.
see the power of 104.5 The Zone. At Buck Rising on Twitter. His name is spelled Reising. Tweet him at 11:41 a.m. We'll remind you, don't worry. Actually, we'll be in break at 11:41. Can we do like 11:37? Let's do like 11:37 a.m. to tweet at Buck Rising.
11:37?
Yes.
All right, 11:37.
Malcolm Butler. That's all you have to say.
Setting an alarm.
Perfect.
Malcolm, period. Butler, period.
So running through Josh Heupel's recruiting classes at Tennessee, and I posed the question on Twitter as well, putting out our Periscope league, breaking down where Josh Heupel's recruiting classes finished in the American when he was the head coach at Central Florida. Should UT fans be concerned? So, Braden, here you go. 2018, second in the American Athletic Conference, Josh Heupel's first recruiting class that he's really kind of taking from Scott Frost. Year 2 at Central Florida, Josh Heupel has his best recruiting class. It was 60th nationally. It was number 1 in the American Athletic Conference. That class included the number 728 prospect in the country, Dylan Gabriel, who played a whole lot better than that last season as a redshirt freshman, to give him credit there. So credit where credit's due. He sustained the success of Scott Frost. We're going to get to where his class is ranked in a moment. But number 60 of the country, 2019, it was a good class. 2020, a big old step back. And this is why you see Central Florida struggle in 2020, go 6-4, because they have a lot of injuries. Mackenzie Milton, one of those guys, a lot of injuries. They didn't have the depth because they were 7th in the American Athletic Conference. 7th in the American Athletic Conference in 2020. You go from leading the conference in recruiting, according to
it's
recruiting.
Starts with the C.
That's my bad.
There's no G at the end either. It's just
That's my
recruiting.
bad on that. You go from leading the conference in recruiting, according to 247 Sports, to 7th. It's not great. And then this class in 2021 finishes 4th.
East Carolina and Tulane and Memphis had better recruiting classes than Josh Heupel.
I can't knock the Memphis part too much.
Was that Norvell still? I don't think so.
It wasn't. But
Memphis is not a great recruiting base. It's solid. It's nothing like UCF.
yeah, but they're good.
It's
Memphis has a proof of concept to
You-
say,
you
which
see-
UCF does too.
UCF is a better
I
team
agree.
and a better recruiting base.
I agree. But still.
Draw a 6-hour radius around Memphis.
Oh, I know.
It's not as good as
You'd barely
Houston.
be including Knoxville.
It's not as good as Houston. It's not as good as SMU. It's not as good as
Great
UCF.
basketball recruiting base.
Right, exactly. It's not as good as USF. There's multiple UFs that are better recruiting bases than Memphis.
Scott Frost at UCF in his first season in 2016 with a really bad program he was inheriting. I mean, they're 0-12. Was 4th in the American in his first season in 2016.
And then was
Then was first in 2017.
Yeah.
Granted,
Yeah.
I like the Scott Frost comparison because it's important to know how the guy after you recruited as well. And we're going to see that this year with Gus Malzahn at Central Florida as well, to see how he sustains or improves upon or is worse. He's not going to be worse.
This is the Dan Mullen thing at Mississippi State. Like, how did you recruit and how did you win relative to people who have been in the job before? It's really important. That's how you evaluate Dan Mullen. People are like, "Oh, Dan Mullen never won the division." I'm like, it's Mississippi State. Like, you
I
can't.
don't know what people expect
like-
at Mississippi State.
But you know what he did? He did things that no other coach in Mississippi State history has ever done.
He's also the first head coach ever to be ranked number 1 in the first ever college football playoffs midseason rankings.
6 consecutive bowl games. Mississippi State had never done that before. Anyway,
It's a great trivia question, like 10 years. Who was the
Yeah.
first ever number
Right,
1
that's-
team?
that is a good
And
one.
the first ever playoff ranking was Mississippi State.
Like which state
Shout
had
out Dak
2 teams
Prescott.
in the top 3?
Yeah.
But Scott Frost, to immediately step into a bad football team with mediocre recruiting and instantaneously make them a great football team with great recruiting. Like that is what good coaches and great coaches do on the Group of 5 level. They step into a job and it immediately gets better. FAU immediately got better.
But they haven't immediately gotten better at Nebraska. That's
Right.
why
so,
I don't love the Scott Frost comparison.
And what did Scott Frost do as far as his staff at Nebraska?
Took them all there.
He brought everybody.
Right.
He brought everybody.
No,
And he probably did himself a disservice.
It doesn't translate to the Power 5. It's not necessarily translated.
Right.
Like the Group of 5 is, again, this is what I said earlier, coaching is far more important at the G5 level than it is the P5 level. It's still important, but the players become more important the higher in football you go.
Where Josh Heupel has arguably Auburn's 2 best recruiters from last season in Cody Burns and Rodney Gardner.
Right. And that's again, we could have another Kevin Steele conversation too here if we wanted to, just to beat that dead horse. But Nebraska's a far more difficult. Nebraska's a really interesting job. It's just there's no players within 6 hours of Nebraska literally in any direction. There's not a single human that plays football within 6 hours of Lincoln, Nebraska.
Just corn.
But that one's tricky. I just think that when you step into a G5 coaching job, the results come immediately, and for there not to be really a single thing that you can point to with Josh Heupel that he made better at UCF, I think is absolutely worth noting. It does not mean that he is going to fail at Tennessee, but there's not a single thing that he did better at UCF that the guy before him didn't. Where we go to the Dan Mullen comparison and we're like, literally everything he did at Mississippi State was better than the people before him. And that's how you have to evaluate a coach is looking at what came before and after you at that school, and that's how you have to evaluate them. Like, again, Kirby Smart with Georgia, they were shooting for a real tiny target there. Be better than Mark Richt on the field and be better than Mark Richt at recruiting. That's like what? The 12th, 10th best class in America and winning 10 games?
Which is not good enough for Georgia.
The target they were shooting for was real small. And Kirby Smart hit it. He got to the national championship game and he's recruiting better than Mark Richt. So it's relative to where the people were before you. And if you're held up against Jeremy Pruitt, you're going to do great. He's going to be fine.
Well, the recruiting was good, Braden.
This is also why
Butch Jones' recruiting was phenomenal.
I was going to say, this is why I'm not grabbing Butch Jones's Cincinnati classes and Tennessee classes, because it didn't matter. It didn't matter how well he recruited at Tennessee.
He got great players. I mean,
he did.
Pretty good players.
We're seeing how great those players are now in the National Football League.
For the most part.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's pause this conversation
Alvin
for a
Kamara
moment.
led the team in touches and total yards. I just want to remind everybody.
That's my hottest Tennessee take, was that Jalen Hurd still deserved all the carries that he got at Tennessee. I got roasted for that at the time. I think people are a little more apologetic to the amount of carries Jalen Hurd got.
I think it's hilarious that it's he didn't know how to use a good player when he had him.
Yeah,
like,
you can have 2 running backs and know how to use both of them.
And Alvin Kamara led the team in touches and yards. Like, I just
unbelievable.
All
right.
Don't let facts get in the way of a good story.
Hey, let's give away some tickets. Let's do that.
Tweet at Buck Rising.
Got him right here.
Tweet at Buck Rising. The inaugural Big Machine Music City Grand Prix hits the streets of Nashville August 6th to 8th. Guys, this thing's going to be incredible. It's a weekend festival. It's going to offer you 5 concerts, 4 races over 3 days. Concert performers announced thus far: Alan Jackson, Brooks and Dunn, Justin Moore, Riley Green, Danielle Bradbury, Tyler Farr, Jamie Johnson. It is going to be awesome. And now we've got your chance to go. 104.5 The Zone, Summer of Fun. We want to help you get your family out to fun attractions this summer. Be caller number 5 right now. Call Lucas Panzica at 615-737-1045 to head to the inaugural Big Machine Music City Grand Prix, August 6th through 8th in downtown Nashville. A pair of single-day tickets. Caller number 5 right now. I see Lucas Panzica talking on the phone. There are many of you trying to get in on this. I would be doing the same if I were you. Braden, are you going to be out there for this?
Oh, man. I love racing.
Really? I didn't know this about you.
I've been to 7 or 8 Indianapolis 500s.
Really?
It is, next to the College World Series, it is my favorite event to go to as a fan.
Wow. Okay.
You bring your own beer in.
Sold.
Bring your own food.
Where do I sign?
You bring your own water. You don't spend any dollars when you're in there. And people go
It sounds like steeplechase.
And rocket ships go, no, except for the action is fun. 220 mile an hour rocket ships go around in front of you. Like,
it's gonna be really cool.
Pretty
I'm
awesome.
excited about this.
Pretty awesome.
615-737-1045 as we continue our Tennessee discussion as well. Two other coaches, Braden, that we're going to compare to Josh Heupel's recruiting at Central Florida. Lane Kiffin, the one that got away for a lot of Tennessee fans, and you still can't convince me it would have been the right decision, but that's a separate topic for a separate day. 2017, Lane Kiffin walks into Boca Raton, has the top class in Conference USA. Day one, 2017. 2018, he has the number 75 class in the country. It was ranked third in Conference USA. It's not great, but it's not terrible. Top three in the conference. It's not big enough of an outlier for me to really. It's not seventh in the American the way Josh Heupel was in 2020.
And the AAC, just to be fair, just like the SEC is significantly more difficult, the AAC is a much more difficult league to recruit in than Conference USA.
It's a little bit more apples to oranges, but I think this is interesting because I'm going to tell you where Lane Kiffin's first class just finished at Ole Miss as well, which I think is a super interesting.
2017 was his first year, right?
Yes.
They won 11 games.
2019, Conference USA, number one in the conference. 61st overall. Lane Kiffin leaves Boca Raton.
Rat's Mouth, Florida.
That's right. Number 61 in the country, number one in Conference USA. Lane Kiffin, year one at Ole Miss, Braden. This is a target for Josh Heupel. This is a realistic goal for Josh Heupel. Finish with your first class better than where Lane Kiffin finished with his first class at Ole Miss. It was 34th in the country. Right now, for perspective, Tennessee is ranked 43rd with its recruiting class, according to 247 Sports.
We got so long.
It's way too early to judge any recruiting class rankings for teams.
Yeah, it was a year ago today. Jeremy Pruitt had the number class
one
in the country.
If they were if they finish 34th in the country, there should be a riot. Tennessee should never, ever recruit at 34th in the nation. Unless you have such a small class that you can sign like 11 dudes.
What is the benchmark for not having a riot?
25th?
I don't know.
They finished 26.
It's almost riot-worthy.
I can tell you, there were riots when they almost hired Greg Schiano.
We'll riot. We'll riot about anything.
I was going to say.
Tennessee fans, look, if you're a Tennessee fan listening to this as well, you've already played your riot card. You can't be the fan base that calls riot.
No, you could argue you played it at the right time.
I don't think you could definitely have an argument about.
Are you kidding me? Have you lost your ever-loving mind?
That's not the time to riot.
Good God.
You think they played it too early?
Yes.
They played
it in 2010 when Lane Kiffin left the first time.
Now you can't play the riot.
You get one riot every 10 years.
Every decade.
How about this?
Honestly, Tennessee fans, let's be smarter. If you're going to riot, I know this happened in 2010, that monstrosity of a sculpture on pedestrian walkway in Knoxville.
Gotta go.
I am not actually condoning vandalism at UT.
Absolutely not.
I am in no way, if anyone's listening to this, I'm not condoning vandalism at the University of Tennessee.
Sounds like you are.
I'm winking into this. No, I'm kidding.
I think you should get one good riot and one bad riot per decade. I think that's a fair, meaning like 01, I lived in the fort. And it was like a mini riot when Travis Stevens ran for like 234.
How many couches?
A good riot.
We had a sanctioned burning. We had the fire department stand with us and watch the couch burn because they were like, we're going to oversee this.
I have a video on my phone.
We're going to watch you guys do it.
We
had firefighters chaperoning our couch burning.
Within 15 minutes of Jawan Jennings catching the Hail Mary in Athens. Within 15 minutes, I was in the fort watching a couch burn.
There you go.
And this was not like,
good riot.
Hey, let's go ahead and pour the lighter fluid. Here we go. This was like you could see it from a mile away, like smoke in the air.
You're a little concerned.
15 minutes after, as in like they were ready.
Well, I mean, they've been desperate.
They were ready.
Thirsty, man. Thirsty. I think one good and one bad riot every 10 years. You've already used both of them up. You've used up both of your bad riot cards.
You used the good riet?
15 years.
Oh, well, yeah.
I would
Jawan
say
Jennings.
like 01, but was there any good riots between 01 and Jawan Jennings? Any good riots?
When they came back against LSU down 21.
Yeah.
in Baton Rouge. That was a riotable because I remember
Okay.
my brother and sister were at UT at the time, and I remember them being like, "Hey, we're burning a couch right now." What year was that again?
No iPhone. No social media, no iPhone.
Was that 04?
That would have been my last year.
Because 05 was a bad year, so probably 04.
My last fall
It was Ainge.
was 04. Yeah.
Because
I thought
Ainge
it
runs
was-
out the back of the end zone and gets a safety in that game in the first half, right?
Oh, my
That
favorite
was Gerald
one-
Riggs Jr. over the top in overtime to win the game.
Which year was the Rick Clausen bouquet?
I could do this stuff all day.
Yeah, which year was the Rick Clausen bouquet toss? Where he's like throwing the bouquet to the
That's
maid of
what-
honor.
I
when they
thought
lost
this-
to Auburn in the
back
SEC
of-
championship.
No, it was the back of the LSU end zone, right? Where he's like just throwing the.
Yeah, that's what
I
I'm
thought
thinking
this
of.
was Rick Clausen was involved in this LSU game.
That's
So maybe
right.
that's the same one I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
It
All
was
of
definitely
the-
a Gerald Riggs Jr. game.
All of the good and bad Tennessee
running
riots run together. They all just run together.
615-737-1045.
By the way, you know who won these tickets? Who just happened to be caller
I
5?
saw it on Twitter.
Our guy.
The mayor of Nashville just won our tickets. No, it's not Mayor Cooper. It's V-Love.
Nice.
He was.
Way
the
to go,
lines
dude.
lit up, and he just happened to be caller 5.
He's
Literally, I was looking at the call screener before I could even say be caller number 5. We had 8 calls.
points for
I was
commitment.
reading who the concerts were going to be, and the lines lit up. I was like, oh, so it's going to be like that today.
Dude,
Congratulations. V-Love.
racing is fun, man.
I love V-Love so much.
Right.
V-Love at the Nashville SC game last night.
He's at everything.
He is. V-Love and I have that in common. V-Love and I also share a birthday. We've
Well-
talked about this recently.
Jayon Brown was
coming
at
up.
the Nashville SC game.
That's right.
5 seats down from me.
Yes, he was.
Hey, can I say how weird it is to see Titans linebacker Jayon Brown in line at concessions at Nissan Stadium?
Yeah, he's like
That is a little odd.
Yeah,
'cause
it
he's
just
around
didn't- it
our
didn't
age.
feel right.
He's closer to your age than he is mine. He was drafted in 2017.
Aren't you guys like 1 year apart?
We're like 2, aren't we? Yeah,
I was about to turn 24. I'm 25.
Oh, he's closer
oh,
to
yeah,
your age.
like a year and a half. When's your birthday, Lucas?
October 26th.
Yeah, a year and a half.
I'm
Closer
gonna
to 2 years than one.
steal your identity now.
But Jayon's 26. But he was enjoying the game. He was.
I had people, by the way, and look, an angry mob's going to show up if I keep talking soccer.
No. There were more people at that game last night than multiple Vanderbilt football games 2 years ago.
23,000. That's a
Do we
good
want to get into
weekday
this when we
number.
come back?
God, yes.
I had
I've
There were
got
more
stuff to get off my
people at
chest.
the
I got a
Nashville
tweet.
SC game than the entire Olympics combined.
I got a tweet from our guy Zach Allen yesterday who said, "Hey, I actually strongly, if I was in town, I think I was going to go to this game." He's like, "I'll never cheat on my Preds, but like you've got me wanting to watch Nashville SC now," which
Well, you could
That's the
support
whole.
both.
That's the whole point.
that's what we want. But he was like, "But Buck Rising goes away on vacation, and y'all just turned it into a soccer show." And I tweeted back at him. I was like, "Honestly, yesterday was going to be Mike Jacobs is going to be talking to Buck yesterday if he's not talking to us."
The biggest signing.
I want to
in-
put that out there now.
Yeah,
Yes,
the biggest.
I can confirm this.
The biggest signing in club history and a match that night. It's
Yeah,
just
it was a no-brainer.
But here's the
It's not
here's-
just because I'm here.
But here's the thing, like
Doesn't hurt.
it's not about what we care about. It's what Nashville cares
It's
about.
what's happening too.
And again, I got
Yes, it is games that are happening.
I got a
It's
text
real,
message.
tangible sports.
I have a text message from an in-law who will remain nameless to protect the innocent, who was like, "This is too much UT recruiting talk. Yeah, when are y'all gonna
There we go.
move on?" And I want to say to him, that's fair. That's fine. We got a lot of Tennessee people in this city that love Tennessee. But guess what? There are more people in this city right now that will go to a Nashville SC soccer match than will go to a Vanderbilt football game. So that is an SEC. When Vanderbilt beat Missouri, won an SEC football game on a fall Saturday, they were about as many people in the stadium as there were last night for a Thursday holiday week soccer match.
Well, to be fair, what were COVID regulations at
This
Vanderbilt?
was 2019.
Oh, 2019.
I
not
didn't
2020.
even look at last year. I went back
Oh,
to
that's
when there
right.
was
Vanderbilt
actual.
didn't win a game in 2020. You're right.
Right.
Forgot.
But
Let's do this on the other
let's not
side.
be rude.
615-737-1045. If you're a Vandy fan that wants to yell at me and Braden Gall, well, there's nothing to yell at us for. We just stated facts. We're going to continue doing that when we come back. Coach Dave McGinnis coming up at 12:20. Going to get into a Titans discussion with him, but we'll continue this Tennessee discussion. We'll take it wherever you want to go as well in the SEC. 615-737-1045. We'll keep it rolling when we come back on 104.5 The Zone.
They have Middle Tennessee sports on their mind 24/7. 3HL with Brent Doherty, Don Davenport, and Ron Slay. This afternoon starting at 3. 104.5 The Zone.
Wow.
That's how you make a soccer topic relevant to the city right there, boys. Finding ways. PJ Fleck at Western Michigan. I teased this, so I got to follow through on giving his recruiting rankings in the MAC. 2013, 7th. 2014, first in the MAC. 2015, second in the MAC. 2016, first in the MAC.
And the Cotton Bowl.
Yep.
Undefeated season, Cotton Bowl. I think they lost to Wisconsin in that game. And the Minnesota job.
That's a guy that...
That's the plan. That's
a guy that a lot of Tennessee fans try to compare to Butch Jones, A, because he came from the MAC, and B, because he speaks in cliches. There are a lot of coaches that came from G5 that speak in cliches who are not Butch Jones and have been wildly more successful.
Yeah, I hate that comparison,
to
be
be
honest.
I've got buddies who during the coaching search, I was like, Billy Napier's got to be the guy, right? And they're like, nah, Saban assistant. I don't want one of these no-name group of five guys. And I was like, well.
No name?
I was like,
You mean the best group of five coach on the planet?
You think Tennessee's getting a guy with a name that's other than Gus Malzahn who's out of a job just because the timing worked out well there?
PJ Fleck has proven to be a far better developer than Butch Jones ever was. At the wide receiver position especially.
They took a major step back last year. How much
They
that was
did.
COVID, I don't know. But they could not finish the season. That was great. Again, we're talking way too much Minnesota football here because people don't care about Minnesota football. But
it's a broader audience, Braden.
But I do think there is a fair comp there between Butch and PJ. I think PJ Fleck's better. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But he is very shticky. Everything he does is a shtick, and there are not all coaches talk in cliches. Even Power 5 coaches, almost every Power 5 coach talks in cliches. There's a difference between cliches and performative shtick. And Butch was performative shtick, and PJ Fleck is performative shtick. Billy Napier is not. I talked to Billy Napier the day he got the Louisiana job on National Signing Day, and he did not sign a single player. And he goes, look, we're doing something different at Louisiana. We didn't sign a single player that was committed to us when I took this job because I want to evaluate them. And me and our staff is going to look at these guys, and we're going to sign up an entire class in January. And that's not a cliche. That's just a dude telling you how it is. So Billy Napier, I think, would have been a godsend for Tennessee.
Pizzle on Twitter,
What?
great name, says, talking about 1045 The Zone, talking about there isn't anything to talk about. The NBA Finals are on. I'm confused.
What were the ratings in Tennessee, in Nashville for that game?
Probably less than the 4 the Predators did in the playoffs on television.
We just had a caller call to thank us for not talking about
Perfect.
NBA Finals.
Speaking of callers, one of my favorites, Gator Mike, is with us.
My man.
615-737-1045 if you want to jump in. Gator Mike, what's going on, man? How are you? You there? Here we go. Gator Mike, how are you?
There we go. Hello.
How are we doing? What you got for us?
Good. What's going on, Will? How you doing?
I'm great. I'm better now that you have called in to chat with us, Mike.
Yeah. Speaking of riots, I almost had my own meltdown. I think was it the 2017 game that Tennessee finally beat Florida?
Yep.
2016.
Yeah.
2016, I was
when
there.
Florida's up 21-3
one.
going into the half, I'm feeling pretty good. And then all of a sudden to get outscored 38-7. Yeah, that was riot worthy on my end of how bad my team played in the second half. But that's okay.
Well,
But Braden,
we all remember Treon
Braden,
Harris. So
That's the hottest I've ever been at a football game, by the way. Ever. Ever. I'm still sweating from that
man.
2016 Tennessee Florida.
that was every September of my college.
Didn't know if you were
Well,
talking about
same.
your outfit or something.
Oh, true.
oh God, yeah. That had to have been the most miserable. 10-9. Tennessee gets 3 field goals when you got Jalen Hurd just running up and down the field.
It's an awful game, awful football game.
Lots of interceptions.
Oh yeah, that's worse than that old 3-0 LSU game. Way back in the day, it's just awful. But Braden, my question is,
Yes, Mike.
I always critique the Fringe Element podcast. By the way, free plug there. If you aren't listening, listen to it.
Rate,
Great
review,
SEC
subscribe.
talk.
That's
right.
I did not pay for Gator Mike's name, image, and
This
likeness.
is not an NIL deal.
Thank you, Mike.
That's right, yeah. But Braden, is Emory Jones going to be our quarterback the whole season long,
Ooh.
or do you think Anthony Richardson eventually takes over the reins? Obviously, they'll both get a large amount of playing time, but that is my main question. That is what piques the interest in Gator Nation. I'll hang up and listen. Always great to talk to you guys, and have a great day.
I am convinced that if Emory Jones, and good to talk to you, Mike, I am convinced that if Emory Jones starts the entire season, that he will be among the best quarterbacks in the SEC and put up monstrous numbers. And that is because I trust whoever is holding the football for Dan Mullen, because Dan Mullen will make that person successful. If it's Richardson, I think that person will be successful. So I don't know who it's going to be. Emory Jones, I would be shocked if Emory Jones is not the starting quarterback for Florida to start the season.
There is hardly any evidence to the contrary that whatever quarterback is holding the ball for Dan Mullen will not be
If
successful.
you want to
Especially a
argue
running
this guy's
quarterback?
not blue, then go for it.
Yeah.
Especially a mobile quarterback. I think he can do so much more with a runner.
Well, here's the thing, though, with Emory Jones, and that is the question, because Alex Smith, Dak Prescott, Tim Tebow, we know who he's developed. Those guys are all like 230, 240. They're all big dudes.
That's fair.
And they can run between the tackles, and they did in college. I don't know if Emory Jones is built that way. Now, what he did with Kyle Trask is show us that the rest of his playbook is pretty darn special, too. If he doesn't have a running quarterback, he still can design an offense that is among the best in America. I'm willing to say that I think if I had to pick one human being to run my offense, design it, implement it, I think Dan Mullen's scheme is the best scheme in America. I think he calls the best scheme, implements the best scheme, gets the most out of his offensive weapons. He didn't have an offensive line or a running game last year and had a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback. I think they're going to be fine at quarterback. The question for Florida is, can they find any balance running the football? And the middle of their defense, safety, middle linebacker, defensive tackle. If the middle of the Florida defense is good, they can hang with Georgia, and maybe they get Bama week 3 at home. That is huge.
That's true.
They could-
615-737-1045.
Both teams breaking in new quarterbacks.
Real quick before we go to break.
I trust Emory Jones over Bryce Young, frankly.
Big deal that Nashville SC gets 22,000 on a Thursday night.
So here's my
23?
question. Here's my question for you guys. On the surface, you say, all right, Vanderbilt twice in 2019. I go back to 2019 because that's a real year of fans, not 2020. That number last night for Nashville SC was greater than 2 Vanderbilt home games. They were non-conference against like East Tennessee State and Slappy State, and they outdrew 2 Vanderbilt home games. The other 2 that were of note to me were Missouri and Kentucky, which are 2 decent teams, 2 games that Vanderbilt circles as probably swing games where you might be able to win. They actually beat Missouri and drew like 23-9.
Missouri was ranked at the time.
They 23-9, which is 1,000 more people than were at the soccer match last night. So my question is, a fall Saturday in the South, an SEC conference game, should that be there's more going on in the fall? Can I make an excuse for Vanderbilt fans to not be there, or is this because there's nothing else happening?
Right.
This is why people are at the SC game, or are we in a holiday week where everyone's on vacation and no one should be at this soccer match? And it's incredibly impressive what they accomplished last night. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think it's
There's a
incredibly
middle ground
impressive.
It is impressive.
A Southeastern rivalry game, too.
Plus, it's probably the most fair game to compare because you have some away fans there.
Yes.
Away fans are always going to be at SEC football games.
Especially Vanderbilt.
In Nashville, especially. It's a higher percentage of anywhere else. And this was the game for Nashville SC where the biggest percentage of away fans, maybe minus Cincinnati, were going to be in attendance as well. 615-737-1045. We'll hit the headlines. Lucas Panzica will have those for you when we come back on the other side. We'll hit some NBA Finals, some Tokyo Olympics without fans. Plus, Coach Dave McGinnis coming up in about 20 minutes to talk with us. I always consider it a treat anytime I get to talk to Dave McGinnis off the air. Even more of a treat when I get to overlap with the day that he is on our airwaves. We'll do that coming up soon as well. Final hour of the week, next on 104.5 The Zone.
Everything Titans. Your home for Titans football and the flagship for Titans radio. 104.5 The Zone.
Lucas and I got the ball rolling Monday. Buck actually decided to show up for work Tuesday.
That's odd.
And then since then, we have been taking over.
It's so he could take his birthday off on the 20th.
We're not here to take part. We're here to take over. On 104.5 The Zone. 104.5 The Zone TV is where you can interact directly with the show. Twitch, YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitter.com. It's not Periscope anymore. It's Twitter. We've been talking a lot of Tennessee recruiting, a lot of SEC. We are going to shift gears here in the final hour as we get ready to talk with the one and only, the most interesting man in football, Coach Dave McGinnis, coming up in 15 minutes. It's been a fun show. Been a fun week. You're all free of us soon for now. You're not free of Lucas. He works here and is on this show every day. So if you're not a Lucas Panzica fan, odds are, A, I hate you.
Talk to you Monday.
And
Wow.
B, you're not listening anyway. So
I'd like to know how Lucas is going to spend Sunday afternoon around 2 o'clock.
I will be at Fat Bottom Brewery.
With me, yes.
With Will Bowling and several other people.
I will
enjoying
have
the
my-
Euro 2020 final.
No free shots.
I will have my
But we will shut them
But
out
they
'cause
actually
the
they
National
sponsor our
Soccer
shows.
Oh, that's definitely not free.
I will have my Ian Wright Arsenal jersey on. I don't have an England jersey because I'm
I don't know
American.
I don't know what those words mean.
Ian Wright, perfect. That's the goal. Guy who played for Arsenal in the 80s. I've got a throwback.
Got it.
He's British,
Sounds cool.
so I just wear that for England games.
Okay.
615
You're rooting for
737
England,
1045.
and he's rooting for his
I have been an
homeland.
England fan since 2018.
No conflict with sort of, like the U.S. and England.
Well,
and how that whole relationship
not
got
in
started.
not in 2018 because the U.S. didn't make the World Cup.
Well, that's fair.
So that's why. 615-737-1045. Phoenix Suns last night make it 2-0 series over?
I would say no. Since
I don't think so
was
either.
Since Milwaukee was down 2-0 to the Nets and came back and won.
Because
right?
Giannis scored 42 last night.
He's back.
I thought it was maybe a Kevin Durant situation where it was going to be shame on you, Milwaukee, for putting in a guy who clearly was not ready to play again. And, oh, no, you could make this worse. And
Oh, he's ready.
That's what I thought with game one, too. It was like,
he's,
oh, man, it's going to get.
He's back.
Yeah.
Also, I love the Deer District. I think that's an awesome name. That's what they call Milwaukee, like the plaza.
Huh.
Buck was making fun of this the other day, actually. I almost tweeted back at him, but instead I'll just do it here where he can't defend himself. He said, the Deer District is an unbelievably stupid name. I almost replied, I said, dude, your name is Buck. Thank you. That was funnier than you acted. Like, but buddy, like,
It took me a second.
Like, I know I would say he's not really in control of that, but he is because his name is not actually Buck.
Yeah, Andrew, right?
Interesting. Phoenix Suns. The Olympics. We've teased this a couple times. Haven't talked to it. No fans in Tokyo.
I'm just concerned for people, man. Like, I know this is like, that's too heavy, but I'm concerned for the athletes. I'm concerned for the people running the event. I'm concerned for the people of Japan. And I'm a little bit closer to the situation. People don't know this. Like, I have family that lives in Hokkaido, which is the bigger island. My aunt and uncle live in Sapporo, which is where that radioactive thing happened a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Why is that? Is that a military connection? Or?
No, my mom's sister married a Japanese fellow like 60 years ago and has lived there his whole life. And so I've been over there, and I'm just concerned about people. Like, again, heaven forbid I have empathy for other people in the middle of an outbreak of a virus. Go figure.
This was an interesting tweet from Katura Urgi, a triple jump national champion from Georgia, U.S. Olympian in the long jump and the triple jump, I believe. I'm showing my track nerddom here. That matters because she tweeted, no fans, no opening ceremony, no choosing roommates in the Olympic Village, no anything, she capitalized, and you leave 48 hours after you compete to head home.
So the fun that is typically had in Olympic Village.
Oh, my God.
It's not the Olympics. This is just this is a world championship in every sport. It's not an Olympics this year.
I can't even think of the right joke that's allowed to be on the air about the Olympic Village with masks on. I don't even.
I mean, they can't leave.
right by that.
All you got to do is go read the stories. Like, it's not like it's
Yeah.
a hidden thing or whatever. People know what happens in the Olympic Village. You've trained your entire life. You're in peak physical shape. You're gorgeous, and then you win your medal, and then you're done for like 2 weeks. What else are you going to do? You go hang out with other Olympic athletes that are done.
It's sad. I don't think the fan atmosphere is really going to make a difference because you think about a lot of these athletes that are in smaller sports track athletes are used to running in empty stadiums.
I was gonna say, isn't that it's huge for television still, right?
Right.
It is huge for television still.
Like swimming to me,
yeah.
it's electric because of the fans.
Yeah, but you're underwater. How much are you really listening to the
We're
fans?
talking about the product
We're talking about us here.
for the consumer. Yeah.
No,
Well, how many
that's
people
fair,
are in
that's
those-
fair.
how-
I'm talking about for the athletes.
How many people, honestly, how many people are in the building for a swim meet?
A couple thousand,
A couple thousand? Okay.
maybe. I don't know.
I guess it does because you got people are cheering and stuff. I suppose it does maybe because the track is such a big stadium that I don't feel like I notice the fans. And the camera shots are generally tighter on the athletes running.
Yeah.
Because usually a track stadium it's not like a soccer stadium where you're right on top of it. Because it's
pulled
track,
back.
it
Yeah,
has
yeah.
to be pulled back from the field itself.
And I guess in theory with swimming, you have to on television show all like 8 lanes or whatever, and in which case you're seeing more of the crowd.
That's
And you
fair.
just hear the crowd. It's all indoors. The noise
Yeah,
is so
it's-
packed
If there's
in.
any sports, though, that are used to, like, I don't think the product itself on the field of play is going to be impacted by no fans. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it would be impacted by having fans. I know some of these track athletes that are running just in the circles that I run in. Haha, pun intended. And
That's a your brother move
it's on
right
the house. No, yeah. Where do you think I learned that for sure?
there. Good Lord.
They're used to. I've called track meets that are, there's a couple hundred people there.
I think would any event in the Olympics, do you think, be affected? I mean, I know there's some team sports obviously that I suppose, but like I just don't think
Soccer.
is someone going to win a medal or not win a medal because there's fans there? Probably not. And
Yeah, it's all about the consumer
It's-
product.
it's clearly about us.
Basically, the point is,
we're talking about us.
I'm not going to complain as much about the number of people in the seats hurting the on the field, on the track, in the water product, because I just think if there are any athletes that are used to this through their entire careers, it's these ones.
I think that's perfect. I mean, I think that makes perfect
With
sense.
the exception of basketball and, in U.S. basketball. I mean,
This is not a Summer Olympic sport, but I think the sport that was affected the most by this because there were different rules in different locations was the NHL.
Yeah.
Like when you,
I would agree with that.
When you were watching a game and all of a sudden it was 12,000 people at one stadium, and then the series shifts to Montreal, and all of a sudden there's nobody there. You can't tell me that there was a series before that even too, where you're just like, there's no way this is not. One team has a clear advantage here.
Yeah, I mean, Winnipeg, Montreal, it was rough to watch, yeah.
It's brutal.
Rick on YouTube writes in and says, feel like the national pride is much less than decades ago. Agree or disagree? I actually disagree with that. Because I remember how electric it felt when Michael Phelps and that relay team in Beijing beat Croatia? They beat.
You're asking me to
Serbia?
remember who?
No, it was
who
France.
finished
It was France.
Second.
They beat because it was what got him his 8th gold medal.
I can't
and
remember.
they won by 1/100 of a second on
Oh,
the
yeah,
final
yeah.
strike. Like, are you
I got you.
kidding me?
I barely remember
how electric that was.
Ledecky's first name. I don't even remember her first
Katie.
name. Katie.
That's right.
Kristen?
Katie Ledecky.
She's spectacular. She's amazing. But
I feel like the national pride, though, think of the U.S. women's soccer team. And we're going to get to Coach Mack and go to a break here in a minute. But the U.S. women's soccer team, there's a lot of national pride in them.
oh, 100%.
A lot. And basketball as well. There's a good basketball team representing the U.S. again this year.
And
It's
watching them play just a couple of days ago against Mexico. Holy smokes. Watch out.
They are incredible.
Watch out, world.
Rick follows up and says, no comparison from the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Well,
I wasn't alive then, so I
speak to
can't.
Wait, he's comparing the Olympic atmospheres?
The national pride in these Olympic athletes to these 60s, 70s, and 80s.
I mean, if there's a giant war happening, of course there's a little bit more national
good point.
pride. Like, I'm not saying that, Korean War and the Vietnam War were like these massive things that were happening, but they were huge parts of our culture. And when you get into those situations, like, clearly you're going to have more national pride. Like, like debate. What were the Olympics in Berlin during like the 1930s?
Jesse Owens was
with Hitler. Like, come on.
Coming up, I love talking in the offseason with Coach Mack because there are certain perspectives he has as a former head coach. He'll tell you, as a guy who was in the NFL for a long time, certain color that he can provide us that a writer can't, a current player or coach can't. I love trying to go deeper with Coach Mack. What's Caleb Farley and Bud Dupree been up to since they joined the Titans? How much of a struggle and a process is it to get integrated into this Tennessee Titans team in a first season that you start injured. I'm going to ask Coach Mac about that when we come back. Plus, we'll see if Coach Mac, you can go anywhere with him. Like we were talking about Coach Mac going to London when he was with the Rams and like training with Arsenal when he was there. I wonder if Coach Mac has an Olympic story.
I can't believe it came back to soccer and Arsenal.
Buck took it there. I'm saying
this did happen last.
Does Coach Mac have an Olympic story? Yeah, you did. Does Coach Mac have an Olympic story? I bet he probably does. Coach Mac has a story for everything. He's my favorite person in the world. We're going to talk to him next on the Buck Rising Show on 104.5 The Zone.
Do you breathe Titans football? Yeah, so do we. Your home for Titans football and the flagship for Titans radio. 104.5 The Zone.
Dave McGinnis joining us on the Buck Rising Show alongside Braden Gall, Lucas Panzica. I am Will Bowling. Coach Dave McGinnis, as always, brought to you by Farm Bureau Health Plans. Healthcare coverage from Farm Bureau is like an extra set of pads you need the most, protecting Tennesseans since 1947. Coach, good to see you. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing great. You have hand-eye coordination. Well, you were a collegiate athlete, so let's just get out there. Mike Keith and I were with, Randy Wilmore and the Farm Bureau people. Big part of the day yesterday down in Columbia, then at Nissan Stadium. So anyway, Farm Bureau people, some of the best ever, and great coverage too. Yeah, I mean, when you say that you don't have hand-eye coordination, I would have to dispute that.
Look, I turned left and occasionally right for my college sport.
Foot-eye coordination.
Foot-eye coordination is what I'm great at. I could say that I have that. I don't know. I also didn't have to ever come out of the blocks or, have a good start. I had 5,000 meters to get off to a good start.
Well, you were doing exactly what your event said to do.
It's true. This is, but before we get to the discussion I want to have on Caleb Farley, on this Titans defense coach, and integrating guys into a roster for the first time, coming off of an injury. I think that's a specific niche, a specific conversation you can add a lot of color to as someone who's been in this league for a long time as a head coach, as a defensive coach as well. Before we get to that, Coach, though, I'm curious. We're talking about the Olympics. We're talking about some of the interesting stadiums, some of the interesting years and teams the U.S. has sent there. One thing I love about Coach Mac, Braden, you can take it anywhere with him, and he's got a story about anything. I'm curious, Coach, your Olympic story that is unique to you and an Olympic experience that you have had that our listeners would enjoy, because I know you've got one.
Oh yeah, well, my wife and her uncle had an apparel franchise at the Atlanta Olympics. I mean, so they were set up there the whole time. I mean, they were there, during the bombing and everything that else went on. But besides that, all the pageantry that goes on with that. And then I heard you talking a little bit about the Berlin Olympics. I mean, when I was with the Bears, we played the 49ers over there in Berlin, in that stadium.
Wow.
In that stadium where they held that Olympics. And of course, clearly, I mean, I think people know this, but that's why the LA Coliseum was built,
right,
from back in the day. And so it's still, if you look at the outside of the Coliseum in LA, down where it sits in South Central LA, they still got all the Olympic figures, in marble on the stadium. So yeah, I mean, that's going to be a little bit disappointing, I think, for the participants this year, that now they've banned all fans there, because just like, not having fans, what we went through last year, I mean, they add something to it. And then plus the color and the pageantry that is the Olympics. I mean, that's made for a lot of people to be there. So that's disappointing, but those guys, those people, those athletes work a long time, for 4 years for one shot. They've got basically one shot at it every 4 years. So I'll still watch, because I love the summer and the winter Olympics.
Oh, yeah.
I like them all.
Only Coach Mac can take a pre-Nazi Germany reference and bring his football coaching career into it.
I love it.
Only Coach Mac can do that.
I love it.
Well, we were there, Braden. It's pretty historic, I mean,
right.
Just for us, going into that stadium, and you thought about all the history that was there, the Jesse Owens and the whole thing, you go, wow, okay, this really happened. Awesome. And we're here.
That's awesome.
Coach Dave McGinnis with us on 104.5 The Zone. Coach, I want to start the conversation today with Caleb Farley and integrating new players, specifically rookies, coming off of an injury. Obviously, Caleb Farley's injury history has been well documented leading up to the draft and since he became a Tennessee Titan. I want to ask you specifically, what have the past couple of weeks and months been like since Caleb Farley became a Titan? Because I feel like with the NFL draft, we hear so much about these players. We hear about the rookie mini camps and them getting in there for the first time. And then it kind of goes quiet. And then training camp. What is the process like for a guy who can't fully participate in practice, but is still working on learning a system and working on integrated? What specifically has he been doing these past couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a good question, and it's an insightful question. It really is, because you're right. Once you're drafted and everybody gets through the pageantry of what the draft is, and for those players, and for Caleb Farley in particular, that was drafted coming off of a surgery, it's very different, and it's different from this point. Athletes, and especially athletes that are entering into their professional life, they're ready to go. I mean, they want to go. And so the hardest thing that they have to do, first of all, is mentally get ready to accept the challenge that they're going to have, both work ethic wise and patience wise, as far as being able to get back to where they were. I'm not a doctor, clearly, but that specific injury that he had, there's a lot of core work that goes with that. But I've been around, rehabbing professional athletes, all of my career. And the one thing that you do know, the day-to-day grind of it is something that they have to mentally get locked in on. And especially for a young player coming into this league, as excited as they are to get to this next phase of their career, the first thing you've got to do is realize that the rehab process is everything for you. And you have got to be totally immersed in it. And that's extremely important. Now, the people that you surround yourself with and that he has been surrounded with at the Titans are the best of the best. And so while that you are rehabbing, the other thing that you're trying to do is get integrated into what your life will be like. Now, I know that he has been able not only to do mentally what they've been doing, but he's been able to participate in walkthroughs. He's been able to be out there and understand it. And plus, just being around rehabbing professional athletes, they get an itch to want to come back very, very early. And the first thing that you've got to be able to do as a coach, not only as a coach, Will, but let's take it to the medical people. Let's take it to Todd Torselli in particular, the head trainer, who's outstanding in what he does. They've got to protect the player from themselves physically. Mm-hmm. Because they are going to want to be able to go. And the biggest thing that you've got to be able to do is to trust them and to be able to ascertain when you will be able to step back in and to start doing some things. Now, the rehab, most of the rehab that I've been around, normally, first of all, it starts with rehabbing the injury, but then it elevates and escalates into doing position-specific things physically through incorporated in your rehab process. So it's not like that he will not have been doing, whatever stage he is in, anything that doesn't relate to being a defensive back in this league. It's just in a rehab process, much as we witnessed Jeffrey Simmons did when he came into the league. You could see him progressively work from inside on the things, and then when he started working outside before he was cleared to go, when he started working one-on-one with Mike Vrabel out there before he was cleared to go, you knew that he was getting closer and closer. And so, but this is true. I mean, you are an athlete. You understand everybody's body is different. Mm-hmm. And, there's a certain parameters that certain injuries, fall into medically, but everybody's body is different and everybody will respond differently and will be ready at a different time. Adrian Peterson off an ACL, came back faster than anybody. Jeffrey Simmons was an amazing recovery. And when he was able to start participating. So everybody's body's different, but what Caleb Farley has been going through, first of all, is in intensive rehab and the thing, not only like, when you injure a knee, you work on the muscles around the knee. That's mm-hmm. what you're working on. Right. When you injure a back, you're working on your core. I mean, and so the scientific part of it medically, that's what those guys have to get dialed into and trust what they are being told. And then it's monotonous. It's monotonous and it's relentless, but you have to do that. And that's what he's been doing. But he hasn't been totally removed from football at all because he was there the whole time, and that will be a huge help to him. And look, he's not going to be put on the field until they're sure that he's ready for the field. And being ready for the field, Will, in some of those instances, just like Bud Dupree. Now, Bud Dupree's different because he's played in this league. He knows what it takes. But to me, and being put on the field, in my experience, all the years that I coach, doesn't necessarily mean that they're just out there and go from 0 to 100 the first time they put their cleats on the grass. And so it's still going to be a process. But from everything that I hear, he's progressing very, very nicely. But it's been an intense amount of work, both mentally and physically for him ever since he showed up here.
You mentioned the mental side of it and the monotony, and that is just pure psychology, being mentally tough enough to sort of handle the rigors of a daily routine where you don't get to actually do all the things that you want to do. And I'm curious, from a psychology standpoint, Todd Downing is going through a similar process as an offensive coordinator. And he's told us, he's got all the pieces. He's just got to sort of put the right recipe together to kind of keep the offense going where it's at. I'm curious from a coaching perspective what the psychology is on a guy who wants to take over, is taking over, has to implement his own personal feelings and views and philosophies, but also doesn't want to shake it up too much. So what is the psychology that Todd Downey is going through right now mentally as he sort of puts together his game plan?
Well, an advantage, Braden, I like the question because it's pertinent. But he has got an advantage because he's been here. He's been here. He knew what was going on. He was involved in the daily process of this offense for the last 2 seasons. So he knows what it is. So he knows what his base is, and he knows what's been successful, and he also knows what they would tweak during the weeks of not only the seasons but the off seasons to make it better. So that's what he will be going through. All right, and so. Again, anytime you are put in charge or you're following something, it's a completely different thing, whether you're brought in from the outside or whether you have been on the inside and are familiar, very familiar with what's gone on in the past, and especially if it's been successful. But he will definitely put his twist to it. And plus, the offense, I mean, he's got new pieces to this offense, so it's going to be different. And every good coordinator in the National Football League takes what their people can do and then incorporates that into what they want to do as a whole. So that's what he will be doing. It's going to be very interesting to watch this thing evolve during training camp, during the preseason and training camp. I'm very glad that we have 3 preseason games this year. Not that we're going to see the finished product in preseason. I would never insult our listeners' intelligence. You guys know this, saying whatever you're going to see in preseason is exactly what you're going to see during the regular season. But just to see the layering and the genesis of the way this thing is going to continue to add on to what we've seen has been a very successful offensive system in the last 2 years, it's going to be fun to watch. It really is. But he's got an advantage because he has been here.
Coach, in what ways has his job maybe gotten more challenging then? Because as soon as the Titans signed Julio Jones, you heard a lot of, Todd Downing's job just got 100 times easier. Is that maybe a slight misconception? In what ways did his job maybe get a little bit harder with the addition of Julio Jones and all the weapons he has at his disposal?
Well, first of all, Braden, as a coach, you can never have too many good players. Believe me. I mean, I promise you that. That's something all of us as coaches, if they say, would you like another good player? The answer is yes. It's never the other thing.
Uh-huh.
So to me, what he will be able to do, and again, he knows, not only he knows, Julio Jones knows what he does best too. And so that is going to be, going back to what I just said earlier in my last comments, that's what's going to be the fascinating thing to watch as to how this thing comes together. Because, when you let's talk about 11 personnel, it's not necessarily that you're going to have to line up, you're not going to have to line up AJ on one outside and Julio on the other outside. Those guys may be in the slot. Those guys may be stacked together. Those guys may be in one of those 9-ball stacks with Ferkser as the point. Who knows what you're going to see? But it's going to be really fun for me, and I know for our fans and also for you guys just to watch this thing come together. But as a coach and particularly as a coordinator, you are always happy to have more good players.
Coach Dave McGinnis, brought to you by Farm Bureau Health Plans, with us here on 104.5 The Zone. One of my favorite things to do, guys, is to watch training camp with Coach Mac. I feel like this is like watching a movie with a film director, like picking apart the things that the average person is not just going to see. Because if you go there and just watch and stand by yourself, you're watching football practice. Watching it with Coach Mac and understanding, the chaos and what's going on and the different processes is so interesting to me. It's something that stuck out, Coach, that we talked about last year, was watching the DBs, watching Amani Hooker, a guy who you were telling us, hey, this guy's got some traits you can't teach. This season, obviously, we're going to see a lot more of Amani Hooker in a prominent role as a Tennessee Titan. What specifically can he do as a defensive back? What did this Titans front office and coaching staff see in him earlier on in his career that makes them confident enough to think that he is a valuable piece and a capable replacement for Kenny Vaccaro within this Titans defense?
Well, Will, let's just talk about this. And I really like watching practice with you because you ask really good questions, and you truly want to learn. I don't mind. I don't mind sharing anything that I've learned about football in my 40 plus years in it. I didn't invent. I promise
Right.
you. Somebody else taught me, so I'm always willing to share. The thing about him is, let's just go back to Iowa. He was
Sure.
a valuable piece in for Iowa's defense, and they ran multiple defenses. And what was valuable to me when I was vetting him, looking at him, this guy can play several different positions. You watched him and you looked at him and say, well, and especially as multiple as you need to be on defense in the National Football League because of the various personnel groups you're going to see, the more multiple you can be defensively, especially in the back end, and the less substitutions you have to make when your opponent is substituting personnel down by down by down, the better off you're going to be because it helps you to be able to bogey or disguise what you're going to be in. All right, now, going past that, what he's able to do, first of all, he's got great spatial awareness. And to play back there where he plays, you have to have spatial awareness. The other thing is he understood the angles of being down inside. He understood those things. You could tell he understands tackling angles. He understands a little bit of center guard triangle stuff. That stuff is very important because he's going to be asked to slide down and do some of that stuff. But the thing that impressed me most this mini camp of watching him is now he looks like a veteran that understands what it is to play professional football. The first thing he did is he refigured his body. And when young players come into this league, a lot of the misconceptions that they have, and whenever all the years that I would have rookie players in their orientation, the first thing I would say is, look, you've got to get stronger, but you don't have to get bigger. There's a difference. There's a difference in strength, and then there's a difference in bulk. And that's for any position. I mean, because this is a speed game in the National Football League. Whatever position you're playing, the leverage guy wins, but also the guy that has the most strength and the most speed is going to be able to win. And it's not necessarily the guy that's the heaviest because they get this misconception sometimes that, you go to high school to college, I got to be bigger. Well, you go to college to the NFL, I got to get bigger. Not true. You got to get stronger. You got to get stronger. You got to get leaner, and you got to understand what you have to do for your position. And his body, he just looked different. He leaned himself up. He looked different. Plus, he's been here a while. He and Kevin Byard are going to have to be the glue that holds that thing together back there for a while because you've got brand new corners.
Coach Dave McGinnis, always love catching up with Coach Mac. He's brought to you by Farm Bureau Health Plans. Turn to the folks who've been in the game since 1947. Farm Bureau Health Plans offers the great healthcare coverage you need with a price tag you can afford. Coach, I'm always consider myself lucky to get to catch up with you, even luckier when I get to catch up with you on the air. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Mac.
Will, Braden, Lucas, always great being on with you guys. See you guys. You guys have done a marvelous job.
Thank you.
Filling in there. See you.
Thanks, Coach.
Coach Dave McGinnis, the GOAT. In a world where the term GOAT, in a world where the term GOAT is overused, it's not used enough for Coach Mac. Good question there, Braden.
I could listen to that guy talk all day. Yeah, it was an excellent question, Braden. and Lucas, great job with the interview.
I love it. Oh man. When we come back, hit one more look at the headlines. Headlines for our weekends. Lucas and I will have a fun Sunday afternoon.
Can I ask you one question about the Titans' new offensive coordinator?
Hit me.
I mean, after the break.
Oh, perfect. So we call it tease, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
Braden Gall. Ladies and
Back up to
gentlemen.
this.
I didn't know what it was. Braden Gall knew what it was. We'll finish off the show next. 104.5 The Zone.
When you need to know all the info faster, check out the Zone Daily Podcast with Will Bowling. Available on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and the entire Zone Podcast Network.
Oh, it's that time of the week. Special thanks to Ryan Callahan, Coach Dave McGinnis. Yesterday, Nashville SC General Manager Mike Jacobs. You can find that wherever you listen to podcasts at The Buck Rising Show. Rate, review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe.
His club outdrew Vanderbilt football on a Thursday night.
Don't get mad at us.
Look,
It's not our fault.
What does Nashville?
Facts don't care about your feelings.
What is Nashville paying attention to right now? They are going to soccer matches.
It's not Suns Bucks, that's for sure.
By the way,
guess
shout
what?
out
It's fun.
Joe Bonamassa with the pregame guitar solo.
Pretty good.
I mean, that's a pretty good name to have do that.
I will be going to see live music tonight.
I saw Joe Bonamassa at the Ryman because a sales buddy of mine invited me to go along with him.
I think he'll be there.
Good guy.
Coming up soon at the Opry.
I turned 39 a couple days ago.
Oh,
And
happy birthday.
Thank
I
you.
thought you were way younger.
And
I actually did too.
I was probably 37 when I went.
Okay.
I was probably 20 years younger than anyone else in the building.
Oh, it's like how I feel when I come to work here
There you
before
go.
the Buck
Exactly.
Rising show starts.
So basically, your job is my Joe Bonamassa concert.
Perfect.
Is what it is.
It's not the
Man,
way
he's a
anymore.
god.
I've Lucas.
He's a hell of a guitar player.
Yeah,
like
he's
hell of a guitar
amazing.
player. I was looking around going like, oh my god.
My favorite
Is there-
pregame
is there an
solo.
ER?
Favorite
Close.
pregame solo before Nashville
Is there
games
an
so
ER?
far.
Is there an EMT around?
It was a good one. Soccer Moses was strong as well.
Yeah, I was not there for that one.
Apparently, Anthony Ferkser was in the house again as well yesterday as well.
Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah, that's linebacker bias. Jayon Brown gets, Jayon Brown's here.
Speaking of
Where's ASAP Ferk?
speaking
Great
of
Twitter name.
speaking of bias, because every human by default and by definition has human bias. Like it's just a part of being alive. I love people that complain about them. Oh, you're just biased.
Yeah.
Well, like I'm a human, so like
So are you. You're
Correct.
You
yeah,
think
like
I'm
you're-
biased because you're biased.
Right.
I'd rather be relatable on a microphone
Right.
with bias than no one can relate to me because I'm just vanilla all the
I
time.
can't imagine your sports opinion is tinted by your fandom at all. At all.
How dare you?
But this is my question about Todd Downing. I want for both of you guys because Todd Downing takes over. I don't know how you remove your own brain from the process. And I know you're not supposed to do. He's trying to. Everyone wants him to just keep it as is, right? Keep it Arthur Smith system. I know you're adding Julio Jones to the mix, and you're losing Jonnu Smith, which changes your goal line packages and all kinds of stuff. I get all of that, but what he has told us and what fans want from him and what Vrabel has said is that we're gonna, it ain't broke, let's not fix it, right? I don't know how you do that psychologically when you're up late at night by yourself, looking at your personnel formations and your packages, trying to come up with this is the right scheme for this is the right play and this is the right package for. How does your own philosophies not somehow seep into that process and it become your own? I just don't know how I don't know how that happens. And I don't know what you guys see, but that is my concern is because we don't know about Todd Downing, just like we didn't know about Arthur Smith, just like we didn't know about Matt LaFleur. What does it look like when it is his? He's the one who still has to be the one calling the play in the moment on 3rd and 8. You still have to have the innate ability to know what to call and have designed it correctly too. I just don't think you just flip a switch and it stays Arthur Smith's system.
Well,
he spoke to that after minicamp because he kept getting asked that. A Todd Downing offense, and he's
Right.
like, I want to make it clear this is a Tennessee Titans offense.
Right.
It's not a Todd
it's
Downing.
not a Mike Vrabel offense.
But
though.
how is that possible when we are all inherently biased to our own perspective and experience,
Right.
which I know is a little meta here, but he has his own experience in football for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years.
It's a good point. I think you raised a good question as well, Lucas, that, look, having Julio Jones raises the expectation exponentially. And I think at least here locally, it's impossible for Todd Downing to reach the expectations that so many Titans fans have for him week 1 against the Arizona Cardinals.
Can I say
it's
right now?
just not going to happen.
That was Braden Panzika asking that question.
Can I say right now? I think the Titans' offense is worse this year than it was last year.
Ooh.
I don't think, and I don't mean bad. I don't mean it's a bad offense. I just mean statistically, it's not going to be as efficient.
I don't know. I think
It was the greatest offense in franchise history.
Yeah.
What are the odds of it being even better?
If it just maintains how good it was with
Well, just go
A.J.
from
Brown having 2 healthy knees for
It
an
could be
entire
3
season.
less points per
Right,
game,
exactly.
and it'd still be a top 3 offense in the league.
Well,
and technically,
isn't that like saying, hey,
fans better be ready for that. Is what I'm
Josh,
saying.
mean,
Josh
Derrick
Heupel's
Henry-
first season is technically worse than Scott Frost because he had an impossible expectation year one of ever being a head coach.
That's a good point.
It's the same argument.
This is exactly to your point about expectations about Julio. Like, Julio Jones's career numbers in Atlanta, outside of the injured season last year, if you look at him, it's like 95 receptions for 1,400 yards and probably a half a touchdown.
He's probably not going to do that this year.
But, like, he is not going to catch 95 passes for 1,400 yards, guys. Like, I hope you are prepared for that.
Let's say Derrick Henry has a 600-yard regression this year.
It's still
a
awesome.
1,400-yard rusher.
I am of the opinion
This
that
is my point.
if Derrick Henry is at 2,000 yards again this season, the Titans' offense is not at its best that it could be.
See, what's funny is I actually go the other direction on that.
Really?
I think the person who benefits the most from Julio Jones is Derrick Henry. I don't think it's A.J. Brown. I don't think it's Ryan Tannehill. To me, it is Derrick Henry because
I think it's Josh Reynolds.
You forced that.
That's the thing. The argument can be made for so many different players. Anthony Ferkser.
We didn't even get to today.
But if you are a defensive coordinator, you have to. This is what Belichick does better than everybody, right? In a football game in the playoffs, Belichick does what? He takes away the thing that is the most dangerous to him. He takes that away. And the most dangerous thing the Titans have on any given play is going to be a big play down the field to A.J. Brown or Julio Jones. And if you are going to double team one of them or play nickel or have 5 guys and you're not playing 8 in the box, I'm sorry, you are going to death by a big play or death by 1,000 cuts.
Pick your poison.
And Derrick Henry will, like, over time destroy you. And I think Derrick Henry actually has the best chance to replicate last year of any of these guys.
Plus with an extra game.
Well, that's true too. Let's go on a per game basis here. But
I agree.
I think Julio, you have to expect 25% less production on his average Atlanta year playing here this year. But I think you can expect Derrick Henry to attempt to recreate what he did last year on a per carry, per game basis.
Here's my biggest thing that I want to see from Derrick Henry. Less carries, more efficiency. You cannot afford to run Derrick Henry in week 1 against the Arizona Cardinals in a close game the way you did in 2020 in Denver in week 1. You just can't do it.
Where's Darrington Evans in this? That's the big piece to me.
Bingo. That's the guy.
That's the piece.
I was banging that drum at training camp last season. That was a guy I thought could change the Titans offense because you now had a valuable second option at running back that you did not have when Dion Lewis was there.
But to be fair, running back depth was not exactly that much of an issue last season.
No, it wasn't.
Deontay Foreman, Jeremy McNichols did what they were asked to do.
He was good in Cincinnati when no one else was.
But to your point, Will, you have, and I know Vrabel doesn't want to hear this question ever because anytime you ever ask him about workload with Derrick Henry, he's like, we're going to win the game by giving whoever we need to give the ball. Okay, thanks, Mike. But there is a thing like when human beings have battled the 400 carry mark in the NFL for eternity, and other than like Marcus Allen one time, no human being has ever won that battle. The NFL is undefeated against the human body. And so if Vrabel wants to test it, it's a modern genetic experiment with Derrick Henry. We'll see.
What else was a modern genetic experiment these past 3 shows? It's been fun, boys. Braden, good to see you as always.
We've regressed.
Braden and I will now go back to our feud over the daily podcast in Nashville, Tennessee.
440 Sports, folks.
Rate, review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe. That's all our time. Appreciate you all for interacting all week. Buck is back at it Monday, but right now, Blaine and Mickey, back at it for your Friday, getting you a little bit closer to your weekend. Coming up next on 104.5 The Zone.
J. Martin Ramon. You don't wake up early? Here's what you missed.
What do you expect? Because if it's not what you expect, with the amount of money that's paid out, it's an ever-changing league. The NFL means not for long, not just for the players, or for coaches too.
Jason Martin and Ramon Foster. Monday mornings starting at 6 on 104.5 The